This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Annapolis. Welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Annapolis. I did not have my microphone on before, which is why I'm repeating myself. This meeting, as are most meetings of the city, being brought, public hearings, public meetings, is being broadcast. So keep that in mind. Make sure that your makeup is good and that your behavior is up to par, okay? Madam Clerk, can we call the roll?
Mr. Waldman,
Present?
Mr. Klein,
Present?
Mr. Bellamy,
Present.
Mr. Cummings.
Present.
Mrs. Riley and Svakianutis are not here, and Ms. Butler is ill. I would like to introduce to everybody here the newest commissioner. Thank goodness he got sworn in on time, because now tonight we have a quorum. Mr. Everett Bellamy, we welcome you.
Thank you, Bob.
We have an agenda tonight. I have one item that needs to be added. So I'll move to add a vote on the findings for 01024.
I second that.
Okay. Any discussion? None. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Have you all had a chance to read it? Any additions, corrections, or modifications?
None.
Mr. Pline, I understand you were not there at the meeting, but
But I did watch the video and I reviewed the findings, so I would like to vote on them.
yes, that you qualify by our rules, so that's good. Any discussion, any edits, comments, or remarks to make about it? All right. Mr. Bellamy, you weren't here, obviously, so
Correct.
stay out of it. All in favor of approving these findings?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, very good. I will sign them and pass them around, right? Other than that, do we have any modifications to the agenda? Hearing them, none. Let's approve it then with the addition that we just made.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. We have minutes which have been circulated. Huh? No minutes.
Yeah, I
They're
haven't
not
seen minutes.
prepared? They haven't been circulated. Okay. Oh, that's right. You were out for a week. Okay. You can pass that. The main item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing on the major site design for the Prince George's Park and Maritime Center at the foot of City Dock. And I would like to hear from staff initially as to what the major issues are and what your decisions have been. And then there will be a presentation from this fine team up here. quite an assemblage. I want to make clear that what this covers tonight is not the entire City Dock site design. That has been approved some months ago. What this focuses on is the end of Prince George Street, the Burtis House, and what has been named the Maritime Welcome Center, and you will hear more about it tonight. Mr. Jakubiak?
Thank you. Good evening. The Department of Planning and Zoning has reviewed this application, and you're right, this is the site plan for the Maritime Welcome Center in the Prince George Street. It is on. It's for the Welcome Center Harbor Master facility and the Prince George Street Park. The staff prepared a staff memo or technical report, and we supplied it to the Planning Commission some time ago, perhaps last week or about 10 days ago. I'd like to use my time to review some of the major findings of the staff report and highlight two areas that we didn't have sufficient information at the time to address, and that's traffic and critical area. We are waiting on agency comments in both of those areas, so those agency comments have come in, so I'm happy to be able to report the results of those agency reviews so that we have a full and complete staff report now. The property is zoned Waterfront Maritime Conservation District. It's also within the critical area with the zoning of IDA or intensely developed area. The purpose of the project is to develop the Harbor Master Maritime Welcome Center, to restore and rehab the Burtis House, and to do other park and recreational improvements and uses. The total site area is just under 19,000 square feet. And I'm going to review a number of the major findings from our staff report. And the staff report addresses the consistency with the comprehensive plan and then a number of code requirements. So first, on the consistency matter, we attached to our staff report a memorandum from our Chief of Comprehensive Planning establishing his finding and our findings that the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And, you know, the plan is actually adopted by the Planning Commission and then later adopted and made official by the Mayor and City Council. That comprehensive plan lays out a number of goals and objectives, including resiliency at City Dock and promoting the redevelopment and active use of recreational areas at City Dock. I'm summarizing now, but just in those points alone, that this project clearly is consistent with the comp plan. There are a number of code requirements that must be reviewed as part of a site plan review, and they focused on the district standards, that is the standards within the maritime, within the zoning district. And the standards states that the proposed design plan meets all the requirements of the zoning district in which it's located, including but not limited to site design standards of section 2162. And when we look at the WMC zoning district, the plan uses that are contemplated here are consistent and actually specifically permitted within that zoning district. And the bulk and height requirements of that district are complied with with this proposal. The design of the project is another standard, and the proposed design is in harmony with the character of the surrounding neighborhood and the comprehensive plan. I mentioned already that the plan is consistent with the adopted comp plan, but the project will implement a number of foundational goals of that plan, including flood protection, stormwater management, and of course, revitalization of City Dock, which is a specific goal of the plan. Flood resiliency of the project is a very important part of this particular site plan because this plan includes elevating grades and seawall structures and modern stormwater management. These work together to reduce the recurring flooding hazard, prevent the ongoing damage to the Burtis House. It helps eliminate standing and stagnant waters, and overall it's an improvement of public safety. So the projects that are contemplated and made part of this project are really an essential part of the city's system of flood resiliency and extend the elements that were approved as part of the City Dock site plan, or the City Dock Park plan that the commission approved previously. The architect will no doubt get into this in some detail, but in our staff report, we included a number of images, and one of those images was meant to help prove our point that the new building here in the Maritime Welcome Center and the Harbor Master Building fits compatibly with the Burtis House, the existing structure, but also the architecture includes features that make it blend with the area. The division of the proposed building into separate structural elements using historically relevant building forms, as well as the glass on key elevations, help lighten the mass of the proposed building considerably and reduce its visual effect, making it fit more compatibly within that particular context. And on the topic of compatibility, which is actually a standard of this review, the Welcome Center would be located at the end of a row of commercial structures that will face onto the City Dock Park. And as for the historic Burtis House site, its uses would be institutional, that is educational and governmental. The building will continue to face Prince George's Street, Burtis House that is, and the proposed Prince George's Park improvements will improve the aesthetics in this particular area, in addition to elevating the grade and removing the ongoing flooding problem. There's a couple more particular standards, and I'm going to touch on those before getting into some more detailed comments. Minimizing adverse impacts, that's a standard that the site plan needs to address. The proposed structures, the standards say, should be sited in order to minimize adverse impact to surrounding areas by reason of building location, height, bulk, shadows, location, intensity, et cetera. And the proposed project is located and sited in a way that minimizes impacts to the view of the water from multiple significant vantage points in downtown and on City Dock. Its location at the end of City Dock is mainly in line with an existing row of commercial buildings, and this reinforces the established patterns rather than disrupting those patterns. The staff report goes into a number of specific criteria, and I'm not going to go into those because those are provided in some detail in the staff memo, but these are all criteria that are set forth in section 2162. And two of those criteria I want to just pause on because they're not really developed in the staff report. And the first one is conformance with the critical area standards within the city's code. And the second one is traffic. So on the question of critical area, this property is close to the water. It's within the critical area. The critical area is a more highly regulated part of the city's landscape. The city's critical area code requires that a 30-foot buffer be established between, or setback between, a building and structures and the water's edge within this particular part of City Dock. However, buildings can encroach within that 30-foot area up to 12 feet from the water if they're water dependent. And that's an important distinction because the critical area law provides for water-dependent facilities, active water-dependent uses, to be closer to the water for obvious reasons. And we've found that the project is actually water-dependent and thus consistent with the standard and is allowed, therefore, to encroach closer to the water's edge than that 30-foot standard. And it's important for us to make that determination because we're the administrative body tasked with making that determination, and we provided that determination to the Critical Area Commission. And the commission is entitled to review our determination of consistency. Should they find that the project is not consistent, in other words, should they decide they don't agree with our determination, they could have submit the project to the full body of the Critical Area Commission for conditional approval. Well, the reason why we didn't address this matter before is because we hadn't heard yet from the Critical Area Commission. We had heard from the commission today, and they agree that our consistency report is fine, that the project is in fact consistent with our local program, and therefore the project does not require any further reviews at the Critical Area Commission. The Critical Area Commission sent us a letter, email, as a prelude to a more formal official letter that will come later, but they said officially, we believe, quote, we, quote, believe the Welcome Center Harbor Master Project is consistent with the city's program. So they delivered the message that we wanted to hear and that we believe is the right message. So the Critical Area matter that we addressed within the body of the staff report has been settled. Now, with respect to traffic, there's a provision within our list of site design standards that talk about traffic and traffic impacts. Just today, we received a memo from Kwaku at the city's Department of Transportation laying out what the trip generation of this project is. In other words, what its impact to the area's road system and intersections are. This is a bit of an exercise that defies common sense on some level. The parking that exists on City Dock is what drives the traffic demand. With the removal of the parking, naturally we have a lower traffic situation. In fact, we have a safer traffic situation altogether. And that is in fact what the Department of Transportation found when they did the first traffic evaluation of the City Dock Park. And that was part of your record, and you considered that. So in my scoping out of this project, I asked for an evaluation of what the trip generation would be associated with the increase in building space above and beyond the current Harbor Master Maritime Welcome Center that exists now on the City Dock. And that impact would be plus 16 trips, vehicle trips per day. And that's based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation manual. 3 of those trips per day would happen during the morning peak or the evening peak period, and 2 would happen during the morning peak period. That magnitude of trip making is negligible in the context of area traffic. It's also not even significant enough to warrant an actual traffic study as required by city code under Title 22, our Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. So the scope of the study was satisfied in my view. We've got a good analysis of what the trip demand would be, but we know that the entire concept of this project is pedestrianization, is creating a pedestrian way leading out to this facility. To the extent that any traffic is generated, those 16 trips or even more perhaps, they would be drawn to area parking garages principally, not to City Dock, and certainly not to a parking place next to this building. So we find that the traffic issues are not significant in any way and not worth spending any more time on. But that, I wanted to comment on that. So that concludes our complete staff report.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Jacoby at this point?
Just one general question. So there's, in any of the requirements, you're not asking, the applicant's not asking for any variations or waivers to any of the requirements?
No.
Okay, just for the record.
Yep. Nope.
Think about it. All right. Nothing further?
The last thing further I should say is that I recommend on behalf of the department that the Planning Commission approve this project as detailed in the staff report. And there are a number of conditions that attach to the approval, but those conditions generally attach to almost all major site design approvals.
I noticed that there's one of the conditions, it may actually be the final one, which is that this project has to comply with any agency local, county, state, federal.
Sure.
Let me repeat myself, sorry. A final condition that was on the staff report, which is that this project needs to comply with any regulation, any requirements of the city, the county, the state, or federal agencies. So I think that we are covered with the State Critical Areas Commission, and certainly the Transportation Department is not in a position to require anything at this point.
No.
Okay, but I just want that as a cautionary, let everybody know as a cautionary statement that we still have to receive approval from FEMA. Is that not correct?
The Department of Planning operates as a flood management manager, so we have to give approval. I'm not sure that this particular project in its site plan requires
Right.
FEMA approval, but the entire resiliency project is tied into FEMA's reviews.
Okay.
Are you referring to one of the numbered conditions at the end of the staff report, 1
Yeah.
through 13? Which one?
I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but I do recall it. Maybe the last one, second to last one.
Okay, yeah, number 12.
It was
the record.
drafted at a time, if I may, my understanding is that it was drafted at a time when the approval of the Critical Areas Commission had not really come down. That approval came down today,
Correct.
Yes, exactly, this afternoon.
so that's that. Anything further? I mean, Mr. Jakubiec will be here, so if you come up with any questions, I'm sure we can ask him again, okay? And now it is time for Madam Fogarty and your compatriots here, and Mr. Hyatt.
Yes, sir.
Right, not a potted palm tree, right?
I am not a potted plant. No,
Right.
sir. All right. So, thank you for the recognition. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Alan Hyatt on behalf of the applicant, and we have a number of witnesses that I will introduce you to very shortly. I just do want to make a comment that in response to your statement, the Planning Commission makes a decision on site design plan review. And before any permits are issued, there may be other jurisdictional matters to contend with, but tonight we're here, as we've discussed, for site design plan review in a fairly limited fashion. It's the proposed Harbor Master Welcome Center structure and the park, Prince George Park at the end of Prince George Street, because you are well familiar with everything else that has been approved in the past on the city dock plan. And so this is kind of the finishing touch to the plan. And there's been a long history, and we're going to talk briefly about that, because we've had a lot of citizen input. This whole concept has been addressed in the comprehensive plan. There's a need for flood control. There's a lot of factors that have gone into this project, and we're here tonight to ask your approval for the site design plan. The existing Harbor Master building is not very functional. It is not attractive. It blocks views and is uninviting, at least with respect to the outdoor space. What we're seeking here is to have public access to the water. We want to celebrate the maritime history of this town and provide educational opportunities in the new structure. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We're also trying to activate the Burtis House, as you'll soon see. And there was a city dock action plan in place. I don't know how long ago that was adopted, but this plan comes out of that aspirational city dock plan. So this is not something that we haven't seen or that you haven't seen variations of before. We are certainly aware that the property is within the critical area, and we did get good news today that the Critical Area Commission did support this plan, does endorse this plan, which is a positive thing. We're also in the historic district. We need Historic Preservation Commission approval, and we believe we meet all of the criteria contained in the code with respect to historic district structures. There's a lot of outdoor space, a lot of opportunity for public use. We have some slides that we're going to show you this evening that will depict the intended uses on these structures. You should also know that the Maryland Historical Trust has an easement. They have given conceptual approval. That's another one of those agencies, Mr. Chairman, that has to sign off on this. They have an easement, they have rights, and there's been a lot of discussion with our architect and the Maryland Historical Trust, and we have made revisions to the plans in order to accommodate some of their requests. The structure is going to offer geothermal heating and cooling, lots of natural light, easy access to stairs for vertical access, and this is going to be a gem for the city of Annapolis and for visitors to Annapolis. Tonight, I will first call on Eileen Fogarty because she's been involved in this project from the inception, and this is something that's been called the Annapolis Mobility and Resilience Partners Project. I think you've heard that terminology, and they've been acting in partnership with the city. But our obligation here tonight is to satisfy the criteria contained in section 21.22 and 21.62 as Mr. Jakubiak stated. We think we do satisfy those standards, and we have a set of exhibits just for purposes of housekeeping. I provided the clerk with a set for the record, and I've also given a set to each of the members of the Planning Commission. On top of that, the slides, the 59 slides that we have tonight, we may not see them all, but I would like to offer the 59 slides into the record as an exhibit as well, and each commissioner has a copy of those slides.
So admitted.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I would call Ms. Fogarty, and then we're going to have James Sink, our landscape architect, Rob Thuma, our civil engineer, and then Bryce Turner, who's our architect, and then John Arison, land planner, and we'll try to go through the project as quickly as we can, but we do want to make a record, and that's why we're all assembled here today and trying to do this in a proper fashion. So with that, I would call on Ms. Fogarty and ask her to identify herself, and I think you're familiar with her, but again, for the record, I'll ask her to identify herself and give a little background about your experience with regard to this project and your prior history.
Thank you very much. For the record, Mr. Hyatt has asked me to identify my criteria and my resume. I am a nationally recognized land use expert. I've been identified in numerous forums as a leader in creating thriving urban and town centers. Annapolis, Alexandria, Virginia, Santa Cruz, Santa Monica, Newcastle County. I've lectured at UCLA and Berkeley on groundbreaking work on public benefits and on establishing a national model for sustainable general plans. My work has been the recipient of several dozen national awards for excellence, and with that, I am delighted to be here and to be working with all of you on this very exciting project for the past 5 years.
Well, thank you. So you've been involved in this project for 5 years?
Yes.
And what has your role been with respect to the projects during this 5 years?
I was brought on in in December of 2018, but the project actually started in March of 2019. A City Dock Action Committee was established at that time, and I believe our chair of the Planning Commission was involved with it from the very onset. There were over 100 people, 92 official members from the business, residential, environmental, preservation, design community, and many other areas of expertise. that came together from March of 2019. They knew that it was essential to create or to address the issue of resiliency. The city had been, at that time, had 65 flooding events. We are now at the point where we have had twice that this past year. We are up to over to 120, record for 120 flooding events. And what this large group of community leaders determined was that the city must address the resiliency, they must do better, and they must act immediately. The action committee was formed. It met for that entire year and brought forward a plan for adoption, the City Dock Resiliency Plan, which was the raised park, resiliency barriers and resiliency strategies, promenade. All of that was brought forward to the council January 14th, 2020, and was adopted. Also, the Planning Commission endorsed it as well. Moving
So just,
forward from...
let me just interrupt you for a second, just to be clear, what has been approved so far in terms of the overall city dock plan?
What has been, so that document was endorsed by the council and the planning commission. Moving forward, this past spring, the planning commission and the historic preservation commission approved the site plan for the city dock resiliency plan, which is on the screen. And then this past September, the amended site plan with the fountain, the pergola, and the stage was approved by the Planning Commission September 2024.
So what's left is Harbor Master Welcome Center building and Prince George Park. That's what's left to be approved for the overall plan.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And Mr. Hyatt has asked about the community involvement for the Community Dock Action Plan and the period leading up to approximately a year ago. There were over 150 work sessions and hearings, approximately 350 stakeholder meetings. It's been a 5-year, very robust community engagement process. In the past year, year and 3 months, starting in September of 2023, there have been 100 stakeholder meetings. They were initially ward-based, where we reached out to all the wards in the community, as well as workshops with the Planning Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, council, civic nonprofit groups, and most recently, on October 3rd, we had a workshop, a work session with the Planning Commission and HPC.
Okay. Have you had the opportunity to review the staff report?
I have.
And do you agree with the conclusions and
Yes, I do.
recommendations? Okay. Do you want to, are there any other images you would like to go through for just kind of an overview before we have our experts talk about
Yes,
specifics? Why don't you go ahead and do that
great.
at this time?
What is important to remember is what Mr. Hyatt has just stated at the onset, and that is all of this effort comes from the vision that was established in the City Dock Action Plan. Specifically, the expectations identified in the plan were about reinvigorating the historic waterfront. There were expectations that the Burtis Basin be a new center for commercial, recreational, educational, water-related uses, and that there would be direct and easy access to the water for everything from fishing, boating, as well as enabling the public and our residents to come to this facility and have views. I'll go back one. you get to see here, have sweeping views of the bay, have actual access to the bay itself, which does not exist today. So with that direction, a major challenge has been to really bring this vision forward has been the existing Harbor Master building. The existing Harbor Master building, as we all know, is located within a sea of asphalt. Here are some images of the parking lot around the building. The building is completely inadequate in terms of their current programs and their current facilities, but it is also certainly cannot accommodate the programs and activities that have been identified by the council, the planning commission, in the City Dock Action Plan. The building also sits in the center of an area that will now be our resiliency plan, a raised park area. It blocks views and it has uninviting outdoor space. With that said, the city team has looked at, as well as many of the people in the community and design professionals in Annapolis, what are Harbor Master buildings like that are close to us in communities that are smaller than Annapolis? The building on the right is Rock Hall, the one in the middle is Plymouth, Mass., and the one on the left is Newport, Rhode Island. So with this inspiration and with this challenge, this has been an opportunity for the city to really bring life back to our waterfront, to provide public access, and to provide the Harbor Master a location where the Harbor Master can manage the harbor, can manage the boater safety programs, educational programs, environmental uses, environmental classes, and there will be future water-dependent uses such as the ferry, and of course, ongoing water-dependent uses with the boating activities. And lastly, and as importantly, it's an opportunity to finally activate and bring back to life the Burtis House. This project, and Bryce Turner will describe this for you, this project creates ADA accessible access for the first time to the Burtis House. There will be connections of elevators and stairs, and the Burtis House will once again be an active part of our historic fabric. And with that said, I will turn this over to James for major site design, City Dock Phase 2.
I hand the microphone again. Please tell the Planning Commission who you are and what you do for a living, please.
My name is James Sink. I'm an associate principal at Mahan Reichel Associates, and we are the landscape architects out of Baltimore, Maryland, who have been working on City Dock and this phase of City Dock, the Prince George Street Park, and the Maritime Welcome Center projects.
I direct your attention to tab number 7 in the exhibit package. Is that your professional biography?
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how you want to handle my request, but I would like to have Mr. Sink admitted as an expert witness in the field of landscape architecture.
As you know, we don't classify or denominate or appoint experts. People testify, the resumes are in the record, and their opinions are taken for, the worth of what they are.
Very well, then.
So-
I won't ask that for each of these witnesses.
You don't need to.
Their professional biographies are in the record.
They are.
And I will question them in their areas of expertise.
That sounds great.
You will give the weight as appropriate.
Right,
Right,
that
okay.
deserves. And Mr. Sink, can you speak up?
Oh, sure.
Because there's people, who need to hear you, and you have a tendency to lower your voice. So let's hear what you have to say.
All right, let's go right to the site details. And what I can do is I can have Ms. Fogarty pull up the appropriate slides, and then we can go into the exhibit package if necessary, but I think the slides probably cover most of it. And What I'd like you to do is talk about the site plan and the things that you worked on, including the lighting details, the hardscape, the planting plans, irrigation details, all the things that are within your purview and your expertise, as Ms. Fogarty will pull them up on the slide. So
Go, you're free.
you want to go?
Sure. We'll start with this slide, which locates the project in the context of City Dock. Like we've discussed, the City Dock Park is something we've brought before you previously and has been approved. The area highlighted in the dashed line is what we're looking at tonight. Good. This is what we know to be City Dock today, with Burtis House. They're sort of in the shadow of the field house with some trees in front of it. And the next slide shows a proposed rendering of City Dock with the Maritime Welcome Center and Prince George Street Park located in front of the Burtis House, hopefully a few years down the road. This slide shows the proposed resiliency and flood protection components of City Dock, which this site plan connects to, and ultimately provides a connection to the resiliency project being undertaken by the U.S. Naval Academy to the north of the site. And here we're oriented directly to the site with Burtis House in the middle, Prince George Street Park just to the north of that on the page. The Maritime Welcome Center is connected to the south of Burtis House, and we are introducing new and improved pedestrian access on those three other sides of the Maritime Welcome Center. The last thing I'll add is that there's planting incorporated to help soften how those walls land throughout the site, enhance the pedestrian experience, and ultimately add seasonal interest to the landscape design.
If I may interrupt, the last time we were here, Mr. Reichel was here, and the suggestion was made that in the box between the two stairs, that may be an opportunity to actually plant a tree to provide some shade rather than just more grasses and perennials.
Okay.
All right. Can you take that back? And it's not a major change to this, but I would like you to consider it.
The one thing we'll consider when we're looking at that is this is a street end park. We have the one tree shown and Burtis House, and there is a view between those two. So we'll study the impacts of the view at the end of the street, opening up towards the water. But I think it's always a good opportunity to add more trees.
Shade is very important. It's been one of the important elements from the beginning all the way through. All right? That's all I can do is ask.
If I may, since you brought up something, just for the record, and I know this isn't part of tonight's thing, but since it's being shown, just for the record, if you go back a couple to the overview, in the renderings, the sidewalk on the north side of Dock Street is not as approved in the last approval, and that's reflected in a number of sheets in section 2 in the book, that the sidewalk it narrows, and in the approval, yes, you have to go back a couple. So just for that's fine.
Right in this area.
So up in there, that in the last approval, that sidewalk stays wide all the way to Craig Street, and it's just not reflected either in these renderings or in the sheets in section 2. So I don't know if your source documents have incorporated that in from the last approval, and this is just something that's carried over. But just for the record, I wanted to state that, and hope that gets corrected going forward, just so it doesn't end up in the building drawings. So
I'm sure you recall that there was a study done of the turnaround that was necessary.
Right.
And I think it was found by consensus that there is room to widen that all the way down from one end of the block to the other.
Yeah, it includes maybe taking out a little bit of the islands and the end of the parking, and
Yeah,
maybe one parking spot. We went in that detail, just,
Yeah, that
I
change
want to
has
make
been
sure that's just not
incorporated,
lost
yeah.
in the,
Yeah, it's just
shuffle eventually.
needs to be updated in the rendering.
okay. So, nothing else on that, I just want to state that for the record.
Okay, have you familiarized yourself with the city code, the requirements of the code for site design?
I have.
And do you believe this proposed plan conforms to the code?
Yes, I do.
How much land is actually going to be disturbed in terms of square footage here?
So it is about 18,800 square feet, or an acre's 0.43 acres.
One of the criteria, or several of the criteria in the code, concern consistency with the surrounding neighborhood and compatibility, safety, efficiency, attractiveness. Would you comment on why you believe you satisfy those standards with your plan?
Sure. So as we've touched on, one of the most important aspects of this project is that it will remove the recurrent flood hazard that exists in this part of Annapolis along the water. Furthermore, we would be expanding water access with the potential for kayak rentals, but in addition to just being able to walk along this part of the water, which is difficult to do in the present condition. It also complements the approved Dock Street Park by providing another waterfront park of a different scale, of a different quality, for different experiences by citizens and visitors to Annapolis. And the last thing I'll say is that the materials that we are using on and throughout the project are consistent with areas of historic Annapolis. We're using primarily brick paving materials, other unit paving materials that are being used on Dock Street Park, wood decking, stone, all things consistent with historic Annapolis and this part of the city.
Okay. Would you agree that there are no significant topographical considerations here? I mean, this is flat land, right?
That's correct. The only,
No hills are going to be disturbed, no steep slopes, that sort of thing,
that's
right?
correct.
It's built on fill.
And how about impact on the creek, on the, you're in the critical area, what kind of impact do you think you would have with respect to the surrounding waters?
Sure, we're actually increasing the amount of pervious area on the site, reducing the amount of impervious. So by that element alone, we'll be improving the critical area, but we're also introducing a couple or a few rain gardens on the site, which will improve the water quality that'll be entering Spa Creek from the site.
And then how does this support pedestrian access and just describe vehicular circulation? I mean, there's no vehicular circulation actually within the site, but there is an ability for buses to...
No buses. So the vehicular access that would be allowed on the site is strictly emergency vehicles. So they would enter or leave the site at the end of Prince George Street via some removable bollards, and they would continue through what we're calling an alley that will exist between the Latitude 38 restaurant and the Maritime Welcome Center, and they would exit down the pedestrian Dock Street, where there's another series of removable bollards at the end of that street. Other vehicles that could be allowed on a case-by-case basis by the city as permitted would be service vehicles, maintenance vehicles. Those could be allowed on the site as well.
The bus drop-off I alluded to is at the western side of the site, right? Not the western side of this site, but the western side of the other portion of the city dock
That's
plan
correct.
that's already been approved, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So you want to take a moment, just talk about the landscaping elements as you're proposing?
Sure. This is a good slide to speak to the planting design. Highlighted in green are all the areas of planting which we've proposed. It's a little difficult to tell in the projector, but there's a different tone of green, which is where we've located rain gardens. Those are areas where water will be directed to slow, actually infiltrate through the planting media before it exits into the creek. All the planting proposed on the project are plants native to this region, and we've incorporated, as shown in the orange symbol, one specimen tree, which is located inside of a raised deck seating element. But as was asked by the commission, we're going to study potential for another tree location there between the stairs.
Can I ask a question about that? So the proposed specimen tree location in that spot between the two stairs, so with respect to Ms. Johnson's written testimony, would that location of that tree comply with the federal requirements for a clear zone? Or is that going to be an issue?
No,
With-
it is more than 10 feet away from
The Naval Academy.
All right,
the
just
Naval
check.
Academy wall.
Okay.
And that's actually the reason there aren't more trees, in that more generous area of green to the north.
For the record, Mr. Pline referred to Miss Johnson. She's the Naval Academy person in charge of their flood resiliency. And
Right.
she's been involved in this pretty closely since the beginning.
And Zoe Johnson is here this evening if you two have questions for her.
So do you have, we discussed that there's no real topography, it's just flat, so there's no significant grading, but how about the soils? Are any highly erodible soils present that you're aware of?
There are not highly erodible soils.
Okay.
Is this project being built on fill? Was it initially fill?
Yes, the park area is on fill. We've done a geotechnical analysis. Now the buildings are on foundation.
Okay.
And
Is there anything else you want to add about the plantings, the description of what is going to go on this site?
Keep going.
Or you think you covered it?
Nope, nothing more about that.
All right. We're going to talk about stormwater shortly, but how's the water drainage and stormwater management work from your approach, from a landscape architect's point of view?
Sure. I sort of briefly described my understanding, which is that we do have some, if we could go back to that planting slide. Thank you. The rain gardens, which are where some of the drainage is concentrated, there's some area drains located on the site which outfall to Spa Creek, but overall, we are reducing the amount of impervious and ultimately reducing the amount of stormwater entering directly into the creek from this site.
Okay. Now, we have a lighting plan. You have that, it's under our tab 2. Do you want to make a comment on the lighting plan?
Oh, yep, this is it.
Before you go to lighting, are you done with talking about the stormwater?
No, we're going to talk, our engineers are going to talk
Oh, okay.
in more
All right.
detail
I'll
about
hold
stormwater.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the site lighting is provided by a series of pole top mounted fixtures. It's the same fixture used throughout historic Annapolis and at Dock Street Park. And there's another plan by the electrical engineer. This is the next slide, showing the lighting levels for safe coverage throughout the site with those light fixtures.
No idea what that means.
That's
Concentric
green
circles.
spaghetti.
Mr. Hyatt, could you explain?
Yes,
this?
yes.
I have no idea what that means.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't disagree with you on that plan, but do you want to give an overview of what that depicts, Mr. Sink, just so everybody's following all those squiggly lines on the plan?
Sure. The squiggly lines are depicting intensity of light.
Okay.
And so they're each emanating from one of those light fixtures. And the overlap of those concentric lines shows how we're providing coverage throughout the site.
It's a gradient, is what you're, right? It's
That's
the gradient
correct.
from the most,
The highest
most
intensity
bright
light
to the
is
least.
closest to the light pole.
So when somebody is walking late at night, they're going to be able to see what's going on.
That's
Is
correct.
that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Pardon me, what do the different colors represent? Purple, green,
That's the question.
so forth.
So the gradient is a unit called foot candles. So the orange is a gradient of foot candle, and the greens are moving down from that.
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
The colors are moving away. Think of it like a contour map.
It's like on a contour map, you might have like 4 thin lines, and then the 5th line would be the thick one. And it helps here, they're just coloring them so that when you see the orange, that's the closest to the light pole. And when you
it's
see
the
the blue,
brightest.
that's the furthest from the light pole.
Correct. Yeah.
Right, and
That's
it's the
orange.
brightest.
Orange is the most intense. Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
All right.
So I want to make sure we all understand the, how we access or how pedestrians access the proposed building and the Prince George Park, just because this is kind of the tip of the overall city dock. And if you have a visitor that wants to come from Main Street to the proposed Welcome Center Harbor Master structure, how do they get there? How does it work?
Sure. So this slide is showing the accessible routes. So these are routes that someone who was in a wheelchair or otherwise disabled could use a series of ramps specifically to get to what was mentioned before, Burtis House, which is currently not accessible. It's also being raised even a little higher than it is today because it's being raised out of the flood zone. The Maritime Welcome Center is located at elevation 7, so it's also a tiny bit higher than the land around it. So we have sloped walkways to get to those blue dots, which are the accessible entries to the building. I think it's also important to note that we have some bike racks located on the site in a safe and visible area for people to use, in this corner of City Dock to complement the other bike rack locations that are part of the adjacent project.
So the blue dash lines are for what are known as handicapped accessibility.
That's correct.
But for pedestrian accessibility, there are many more points of access.
There's also
stairs all over the
stairs.
place.
That's right.
Okay.
Is there
No.
a ramp that leads up so that people can get up here if they are in a wheelchair?
So access to that area you highlighted is actually off-screen. It's not a ramp, it's just a at-grade
An gradient.
connection. So Dock Street pitches up and the area along the existing latitude 38 would stay flat with that
Great,
building.
thanks.
So at the location where that site and our site meet is where there's the greatest differential. I think it's just under 2 feet
Thank you.
separation.
Okay. Our slides aren't numbered. I'm going to call this one just for the record so everybody knows what we're talking about. The Prince George Street Park accessible routes with the blue dashed lines. Well, that will be what we refer to that in the record. Okay. All right. Did you conclude?
I think the only other thing to point out on this slide, which is helpful to see, is the different seating opportunities for people to use the public space. So along the Maritime Welcome Center facing out towards the water, there's some lounge seating incorporated, potentially Adirondack chair style seating. As you travel north from there to the edge of Prince George Street Park, there's a terraced seat wall. This is partially serving as our flood protection on the site, but it's also somewhere you could host an outdoor classroom, gatherings for a tour, someone could speak towards people looking out onto the water. And then the area surrounding that tree in the wood decking really lends itself to all sorts of flexible seating. And then there's that planter seat wall highlighted, which holds up the planting between the park and the Naval Academy, but that's 18 inches tall, so ideal for people to sit along the entire length of that wall.
Do we have a slide that shows the park? I want again there to be an understanding of how it all works. When people get there, what do they do? Do we have
It'd probably be best to go back to some.
Is there an estimate of how much seating there is? Like if you had packed that space full for, say, the 4th of July, for fireworks, whatever else, exactly how many people would be able to have a seat?
I haven't done a measurement, but I could lend a guess that it's easily 50 to 100 people.
Okay, we feel that that's accurate. I mean, it's enough.
Who's doing that?
Well, I think the space where you're going to want to be is probably in the big lawn when you're watching fireworks, but this is a location that you could look out to the water from.
Thanks.
That's a good one.
This is helpful, I think.
This Prince
maybe
George
to
Street
answer your
Park
question.
looking.
Yeah.
This slide's Prince George Street Park looking east. Just give a description of what goes on at this site.
Sure. So there's an interpretive component to inside Burtis House, we imagine in the future. So this is a place you come to meet people. You may meet a tour group here outside the Burtis House. And this is one of the more open areas on the site. So there's an area for a larger group to gather. In the middle of the decorative paving there on the screen is a placeholder for a sculpture. So we're not necessarily proposing an anchor sculpture, but a location that the city could install a piece of sculpture or artwork in front of the Burtis House. We think that the planting between the stairs that you see is helpful in creating a more inviting and welcoming procession to the park, which is why we've designed it that way. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you see the switchback ramp, which would provide the accessible route up to Prince George Street Park and ultimately around to the back side of Burtis House and into the building.
Has this been planned for potential connection through Gate Zero?
So there's Gate Zero remains intact. We're not
I know.
inhibiting any access to that.
I know, but in the future, if the Navy relents and something is done with that waterfront and so forth and so on, is this being planned so that this would just seamlessly connect?
I do think it would seamlessly connect, yes.
Okay.
And it ultimately provides a more inviting pedestrian experience to what is Gate Zero versus what is there today.
I understand. I understand that the Academy is, reticent, that they're not eager, to say the least, to allow people to open up Gate Zero. But if they put up their wall, not right at the water, but, 20 feet back from the water, that whole promenade could be opened up and they'd still have security. So it may happen in the future. So I just think that we need to plan for it to happen in the future.
I think it would be great for this
Okay.
site.
But I have
if
to
that
take your
happened.
assurance that it's already, could be a seamless connection if it opened up.
100%.
Huh?
100%. It would be a
Okay,
seamless
thank you.
connection.
You're talking top left of this image, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Gate
Yep.
Zero would be behind
Yep.
the canopy of the tree there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Behind Gate Zero, there's a beautiful plaza that's been designed. It's really gorgeous, and it's totally unused because basically nobody can get there. But if the Academy all along the harbor there put the wall back, not right at the water, but back just 15 feet, 20 feet, and there'd still be vehicular access, but that could become a promenade, and they'd still have security. They'd have a wall for crying out loud.
DC has that on the Anacostia River at their new park space as well, because they have a military facility where they've done the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. Let's tell Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
Pardon me, can you please tell me what Gate Zero is?
Yes, it's a gate. It obviously, it doesn't have a number, but it's been known as Gate Zero. And it's closed. It got closed after, 9/11 or something like that.
Okay.
And before then, they had built this gorgeous courtyard there. I mean, gorgeous. And that's what it is.
That leads into the Naval Academy.
Yeah, but it's closed because,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, there's a number of exhibits in tab 2 that get into more detail. We're not going to get into all that, but they're in the record. And that would conclude my questioning at this time of Mr. Sink. Unless you have any other questions for him now, I'd move on to our civil engineer. Okay. All right, I'll call Robert Thuma as our next witness. His professional biography is in the record, and he is an expert in the field of civil engineering. I'm not asking that he be qualified. I'll go right, as you have directed, and I'll go right into the questioning. Mr. Thuma, state your name and address and occupation for the record, please.
My name is Robert Tuma. I'm a civil engineer, assistant vice president with WSP.
And what was WSP asked to do with regard to this project?
We were hired to provide professional planning and design services for improvements to the city dock in Prince George Park, to include resiliency design strategy, stormwater management design, civil site and utility relocation design.
Let's talk about the stormwater for a moment.
Sure.
You submitted, hundreds of pages to the city with respect to treatment of stormwater for this site, right?
Correct.
But we have a synopsis in Exhibit 6, a stormwater management report. Have you seen that?
Yes.
And do you want to briefly summarize for the benefit of the Planning Commission how stormwater management works on this site and whether it satisfies the requirements of the city code?
Sure. As James already mentioned, the existing site is about 0.43 acres, and it has a 0.33 acres of impervious area, being gravel, pavement, things that water cannot permeate through. The proposed design has 0.31 acres, which is less than the existing condition. Stormwater is managed through a couple of practices throughout the site. They're called environmental site design practices. We have 3 rain gardens, as James mentioned, and then we also have 4 silvacells. Silvacells are underground detention areas that collect and treat the water before being put into the stormwater system.
Are you familiar with Section 1710 of the City Code?
Yes.
And does your stormwater management plan satisfy those requirements?
Yes, it does.
The next question I have is what, we talked a little bit with Mr. Sink, but what adverse impacts, if any, on environmental features does this project have?
As mentioned, environmentally, we are reducing the impervious area, which is always a benefit. We're providing green plantings, for both pervious areas, but also aesthetic treatment. And all of the work is outside of the waterway. So there's no impacts on the waterway. And we're treating the water that will ultimately make its way to the waterway.
You want to take a few minutes just to talk about how flooding is managed, how the proposed plan will help cure some of the flooding problems that have existed down here?
Sure. One of the big issues in this area is tidal flooding. Floodwaters coming up from the bay, inundating the area. So to combat that, we're providing flood barriers consistent with what was approved in the City Dock Park. The flood barriers will continue from the City Dock Park heading north. The section AA on the screen highlighted in orange, those are walls that will be to elevation 8 to protect. The green areas are deployable barriers activated by the floodwaters, and these are to help bridge the gap through stairways and ramps to create that line of protection, ultimately connecting to the Naval Academy wall, which the Naval Academy is working on providing flood protection with.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Tuma was referring to the slide entitled Flood Barrier Plan. Are there any other slides related to stormwater management or flooding?
There's a drainage plan.
Okay, let's talk about this slide is called the drainage plan. Go ahead and explain that if you would.
Yeah, this highlights all of the pipe systems, collection systems throughout the site. The rain gardens are called out. The callouts are a little small here, so they're hard to see. And the dark green shades are the silvacells, the underground detention areas. One thing that is pointed out is the pump station. This is to pump rainwater behind the flood barrier to the other side of the flood barrier, so that we've protected from the tidal flooding, but you also need to manage the rain that's falling behind your barrier system. So that's the need for the pump station. There's an existing pump in this area, and we are improving that pump.
Any other slides that pertain to stormwater, or we got it covered? And there's, again, Mr. Chairman, under our tab 2, there's a few details in the drawings that are in the record that help explain the process of stormwater management. Okay. I don't think we have anything else to add. Mr. Toomey, you have anything you want to add, or you think we covered it?
I think we've covered it.
Okay.
So I have a question on stormwater, and this is really for Mr. Jakubiec. So, we're not civil engineers, and, we can read over what's the summary in section 6. But, so really wanted to ask Mr. Jakubiec, so the city experts in stormwater have reviewed that and found it compliant?
Yes, the department refers those reviews to the Department of Public Works, and their engineers reviews stormwater management plans.
And they found it all compliant?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So there's somewhat of an incremental but positive effect on the outflows and the treated water that flows out. I mean, it's not major, but it's an improvement.
We are required to treat the impervious area. So we are treating the impervious area, but we're also reducing the amount of impervious. There's just a general benefit by providing more greenery on the site and the stormwater. But the rain gardens and the silvacells are being used to treat the impervious area. So those are collecting roof drainage. They're collecting the runoff from the pavers. They're collecting runoff in the end of Prince George Park. And those things are routed through those environmental practices, the rain garden, the silvacell, to treat the water.
So the water coming off the building itself are what's going through the rain gardens and silvacells?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, roof counts as impervious. Yep.
Does the grassy area, does that have any properties as well?
Pervious area generally, water running through soils.
That's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah,
but I mean,
so-
a lot of times they'll put like rock soil underneath that so that it has a draining capability.
Yeah, I don't believe we get enough area to take credit for those.
Okay.
But again, there's an inherent benefit. I mean, you have to have a certain area going to a practice to gain credits for it.
Great, thanks. And the plants that we're using, they have bioremediation as well?
In the rain gardens.
Yeah,
yes.
in the rain gardens. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Mr. Turner. I would ask Bryce Turner to take a moment and introduce himself to the Planning Commission and describe what it is that you did with respect to this project.
Good evening, commissioners. It's good to see you all. My name is Bryce Turner. I'm a principal with the firm of BCT Design Group, officially known as BCT Architects, LLC. I am a registered architect in the state of Maryland and about 20 other states. My role at City Dock has been master planning and the architect for the Maritime Welcome Center Harbor Master Building.
Okay. We have in our exhibit package, aside from your professional biography, an exhibit or tab 3, the elevations and the floor plans. So they're in the record, but we're also going to take a look at the slides with respect to this proposed project, this Welcome Center Harbor Master Building. And I'd like Ms. Fogarty, if you would, to take us through the slides, and Mr. Turner, you can kind of explain what we're looking at, and I'll give a quick description of what slide we're referring to, just so the record is clear. But let's start off with what's on the screen now. This Bringing Our Waterfront Back to Life slide. What's this?
Great. So this is a historic photograph of City Dock, and obviously this was a time early in the 20th century when it was quite full of seafood industrial buildings. It's fascinating to see it. You can see a note at the top left of the image, which is the Burtis House. So it's interesting to me, and I think informed a lot of our design about the general geometry and composition of City Dock through the years. And I think it's worthwhile to know. Now, all of these buildings were, of course, removed, and they put up a parking lot. And so we're now, of course, changing that to a green park. But I think it's helpful to see this in its context as it was, and of course in the context in which we have it today. This is looking more towards, of course, the Capitol from the water, looking up Prince George Street. This image does not have a title to it, but you can see the Burtis House in the foreground. And there is no front porch on the Burtis House, which we now know that was added later. Immediately behind it are some warehouse, industrial-looking wooden frame structures. And again, it's all this hubbub that you see at City Dock that I think must have been fascinating to have seen, of course, at the time. The view of the Capitol is the one thing that you can always see in these images.
Do you have a guess as to the date of that image we were just looking at, this one here?
Yeah, this image is I think it was 1927.
1927, okay, good. Thank you.
So the slide right before this one shows what a view shed they had.
Right. Of course, there was no view shed. Commerce was deemed to be much more important at that time. And, but of course, all the seafood industry has gone from this location to other locations. And now recreational boating, of course, is the new industry. This slide is MWC, form follows function. You know, a very famous architect named Louis Sullivan coined that term many years ago in the 1800s. But of course, it refers to the fact that buildings respond to the function that they host. And of course, we also have to deal with all the other kinds of requirements that we have from local context, guidelines, codes, public input, et cetera. But the building that we're talking about tonight will primarily have harbor master functions. That's going to be very important. There are also other maritime functions there. There is, and some of which are incorporated as part of the harbor master function, but for instance, a lounge for boaters, a laundry facility for boaters, public restrooms, and some educational space. Some of the input that we got from the public was this should be the place where people can learn about the Chesapeake Bay and the environmental issues related to the bay. And so we have space on the outside of the building and some on the inside as well that could accommodate that need.
When you get to the appropriate slide, I'd like you also to address how the proposed structure functions, just, you know, as you mentioned it, and how it relates to the adjacent Burtis House.
Thank you. We will. This slide, design driven by historic district guidelines. So in addition to those functions that we'll talk more about, we obviously have to meet the requirements of the historic district guidelines. We are in the most stringent guideline area where we are required to meet a 22-foot cornice and a 32-foot ridge. And that is measured from the adjacent grade. There are a lot of other requirements, of course, in the guidelines that are just as important. The bulk and the mass of the building should relate to the streetscape of Annapolis. The facade widths are very important. We're trying to avoid, obviously, long, uninterrupted, flat surfaces that are boring and that do not contribute to the historic district. So we feel that we have met those requirements, and there are some very detailed ways in which you do that, as well as with materials. And so with the materials at City Dock, all of those buildings that I showed you in the historic photos were wood frame structures, and we felt that it was appropriate that the Harbor Master Maritime building also be wood frame. This is an image entitled Drawings of a New MWC from Architects CDAC Design Team. This was from the Action Committee, where at this point in time, we were all volunteers working towards the betterment of City Dock. A number of architects around the table there, Michael Dowling, landscape architect Jay Graham, Jay Schwartz, Chris Shine, and some others. We were fortunate to have a lot of great input from the design community here in Annapolis, and it really made the project much better, I think, as we had lots of time and lots of input to work on it. This slide is called the Maritime Welcome Center, What We Heard. So there were over 100 meetings, well over 100 meetings that I personally have attended in this regard. And I think the chair of the Planning Commission has been in at least 20 or 30 of those. And so what we really did here was, from the very start of this with the action committee and all the way through the process, is that the waterfront experience is foremost and really important to folks, to be able to dip your toe into the water, if you will, at least to be able to sit on the dock and have public access to the water, if not even a paddle board or some type of floating device. So that is really important. Water safety and education is something that can happen here. And we also heard that the building should be a little smaller. And we did work to make the building smaller. I'll go over that further. The Welcome Center should face the water directly and address the water, not just the park, but the water as well. And the public needs direct access to the upper deck to view the harbor. So these are things that we responded to. The area of the building was subsequently reduced by 580 square feet above ground. Even the basement space was also reduced somewhat. We basically are constructing a building that is approximately 4,523 square feet above ground to replace a building that's 3,160 square feet, referring to the existing Harbor Master building. The building was rotated 90 degrees to the location that you see it here in the image, which kind of makes the glass in the building seem more transparent as you're looking out towards the water, as it addresses Spa Creek and the bay. And then we did add, since the Harbor Master function is the primary function of the building, it provides for really what we call a crow's nest for the Harbor Master and her staff to be able to look out over Ego Alley and the creek. So this slide, entitled Building Elevation, shows the various heights that meet the historic guidelines. But more importantly on this slide, I'd like to point out the hyphen connection between the Burtis House and the two sheds of the new structure. The hyphen is that area just to the left of the gray Burtis House that you see, a couple people standing there. It's almost like a bridge. And the idea is to have a very light touch on that historic building, but to provide pedestrian access from the elevator to that building. And then we're using a similar architectural move in that darker area, which is a hyphen between our two sheds. And we think that by using these two sheds, we've reduced the volumetric impact of the structure, and it relates better to the historic Annapolis streetscape, as well as allows us to meet the guidelines by having structures that are not large and flat and blank walls, for instance. So these are a couple renderings of the building from the park as an aerial view. You'll never really see it this way unless you're in a hot air balloon, but it helps to describe how the building relates to Burtis, I think, and shows the access that the public has to the building, the on-grade access to this entry to the building for ADA and for the public in general. And the building will be fabricated of wood shingles for the roof and the walls there, and it kind of turns. It's a decidedly modern building that uses historic materials in a way that we feel is very compatible. We're not trying to recreate Disney World or historic structures. We want it to be of its time. There's glass and metal for the glass, and we think the larger glass areas, which was overwhelmingly supported by the input that we got, which would be great for some of the views from the building, so that possibly that space could at times be used in the evening for other uses.
And that's the title of the preceding slide. I just want to make sure that our
Thank
record
you. Yeah,
reflects
that is
building
the-
waterfront elevation.
Right, and it's actually an aerial
Right.
perspective, but it's entitled Building Waterfront Elevation. The Maryland Historic Trust, of course, has played a very important role here. This slide is called Maritime Welcome Center, and Maryland Historic Trust at the very top right. We had to make application to the Maryland Historic Trust and, of course, meet with them as well. They were kind enough to meet with us and give us some feedback as we were crafting the application. But we met with them and we described how this volumetric concept that I mentioned we felt was appropriate for this structure to meet the guidelines for Annapolis, and that we felt the connection to the Burtis House was very important. And but it was a way that we could activate Burtis by getting access to the building with an elevator and walkways and make it relevant so it could be a historic asset that could be leveraged. And of course, the Maritime Welcome Center portion of this is an addition that's to the rear of Burtis. It's really the front of Burtis that's contributing to the historic district. And as we saw in those historic photos, have always had been in the past other buildings on the water side of Burtis. So they gave us some feedback, and some of the feedback was to pull the deck a bit further away from Burtis. There's a window on the gray Burtis House there on the left, and we were using that to access Burtis from the deck. They had a very good suggestion, actually, which was just to enter it from the back side of the building, which is kind of less contributing, less historic, and even less visible, since that's where we are, of course, building on that side of the building. We moved the stair that had been along the side of Burtis so that it's mostly perpendicular to Burtis. And we think that also was important. They requested that we limit the impact of this hyphen connection, again, making a light touch to the Burtis connection. So we received conceptual approval. This slide is entitled Maryland Historic Trust Conceptual Approval. We received their conceptual approval. We will be sharing with them, as they requested, the final design documents and construction documents. But we were pleased to have that. This image calls out the different materials that we're using on the building, the different types of wood planks and metal and glass, of course. We have a couple different colors of wood that helps make the building feel a bit more rich and better texture, I think. And then I also, in this presentation, wanted to just make some comparisons and contrasts to the existing Harbor Master building. This image is entitled Harbor Master Building Comparison. And we built this little 3D model of the existing Harbor Master building so you could see it in its original design light, perhaps, so that it was fairly compared to the 3D rendering of our building. It is masonry with shingles, of course. And so we put them side by side here just to get an idea, what's the difference in size in these structures? And you can see how similar they are in terms of height and even width in the top image. And then, or I should say maybe length, that's the longer dimension in the top row. And then in that second row, you see it along with Burtis in terms of its width. The new Harbor Master building and Maritime Center will be somewhat wider and really has two sheds rather than the one of the existing Harbor Master building. So, the connection to Burtis is obviously important, but we want to have a lively building here that is active, allows people to access the water, as we said, and makes connections to all the site that James presented a little earlier. Renderings, which you saw this when we were talking about landscaping, it gives you an idea of how, in my opinion, this building fits its context very well with the two shed concept. which keeps it more in scale with the existing neighborhood and context. This image is called Prince George Street Park concept. And then from the water side of the building, again, you get an idea of the seating that we were making available for the public. There is seating on top of the deck as well as around the side of the building that would be used for Wednesday night sailboat races or 4th of July, as was suggested earlier. And we think that this building will be very harmonious with downtown Annapolis.
Where's the crow's nest?
The crow's nest is really the deck itself, but we're currently, thinking about what type of little structure they may need. There'll be more like a piece of furniture for the corner there if they need to stand and raise up 18 inches or so to get a better view. So that concludes my presentation, Alan.
Let me just ask you a couple of follow-up questions. Are you comfortable with the location of this building on the overall City Dock site? Is this the right spot for this building? And explain why you think that.
I do think this is the right location for this building. We have studied and shared with in various meetings before the sight lines that you get when you tear down basically the existing Harbor Master building and place it here. It improves the views out towards the water. And so this allows us to tuck the building to the side here along Dock Street where the other buildings are.
Do you envision that this proposed building would have a negative impact in any way on the closest commercial buildings along Dock Street?
No, I think this building will have the park and this building will have a very positive impact on the commercial viability of the existing buildings that are there. And to me, that's one of the strongest aspects of this entire proposal. Those buildings could be doing much better, and I think all of this is going to help them very much and increases their value, obviously.
I think you've addressed most of the architectural features, but our code requires some commentary on the width and facade, proportion, mass, relationship to the street, roof forms, composition of the facade, rhythm throughout the block, the proportion of openings, materials and color. I think you commented on almost all of those, but is there anything else you would like to add with respect to any of those architectural features?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I would really add other than the guidelines themselves show very clear examples, very similar to this, and especially in regards to the ridge roof and the lengths of each facade component. So I feel we meet that very well, and obviously we meet the height restrictions as well.
Is there any signage that has been addressed yet, or no?
Very little signage has been addressed yet. I'm sure there will be more, and of course that must follow the guidelines as well. We do have one sign that we know will be important just to identify the building there where it says Maritime Welcome Center, and we've got to add Harbor Master signage and entrance location signage and a few things like that. But we don't want a lot of heavy signage here, obviously. Otherwise, it needs to be subtle and appropriate for the building and City Dock.
And then finally, are you satisfied that there's safe, efficient access to this site? Because there's not much in the way of vehicular access, meaning none. And does it work for pedestrian access at this site, in your opinion?
Yes, I think it works well for access. I think it's obviously more pedestrian oriented, but we've created safe and accessible ADA routes for wheelchairs, et cetera. There is an opportunity for a parking and drop-off zone at Dock Street, and then the promenade, which meets the slope requirements of 5% maximum for access to the building from the parking area.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to, do you have any slides that show the interior arrangements?
We do.
As you say, form follows function, so I'd like to talk about some of the
Sure.
internal functions.
Sure. So this is the first floor plan. At the top of the page, and this plan is entitled, I can't even read it, but it is first floor plan.
A101 will do. A101.
A101 is good, yes. So this is a more technical drawing. We've now completed construction documents, for this building, or at least design development documents for this building. So it's starting to get pretty detailed. And this is the first floor plan. You see the Burtis house at the top, and you can see the stair that, and we have to have 2 stairs here for modern means of egress. Burtis has one old staircase that really won't function for modern egress. So we're adding this stair here and another one here, which will provide access from the upper level out of the building. We have 2 restrooms that are accessible to the outside of the building there. This lower section in the first floor plan we see as a visitor center and a main entry walkway into the building with doors in this location. So you come in and you make your way to the elevator to get up to the second level of Burtis, or to get up to the second level of the Harbor Master, where they basically are receiving people. There's a small lounge area here for people who are waiting for the Harbor Master, or who may be boaters that will have some access to this space. That's the first floor plan. We have stairs that you can see that come up to the building that allow access for the public to the upper deck. The second level of the building is this one, and this is really all Harbor Master function at the second level. And so you get off of the elevator and you have a reception area, a desk here to welcome people. And then there is room throughout the second level of Burtis, as well as the second level of this building, for the various desks and meeting rooms required by the Harbor Master.
So,
And lastly, the basement plan, which is public toilets primarily and storage space.
so I want to go back to the second floor there. So when you say the Harbor Master requires certain meeting rooms, what is your understanding of that? Where does that come from?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, there are 2 meeting rooms. I understand the Harbor Master up in the front. But what about there's a meeting room in the left and there's a meeting room at the bottom. How is that programmed?
That space would be used by the Harbor Master with desk, and we've designed and envision a desk system where we have modular desks that can be put together for work groups and independent desk as well. There will be a lot of monitors on the wall in there to monitor the security around the harbor. But it basically is all Harbor Master functioning space.
Okay.
It's approximately 2,000 square feet. It's not huge, but it's a lot bigger than what they have today.
And so the only real meeting room then is the room off to the left.
Well, the meeting room, to the left, in the area that we think it's possible that you may be able to rearrange furniture and do a number of things there. It needs to be flexible space, so we're keeping it relatively open. I'm sure it's going to have modular furniture installed. A lot of that will be more of fixtures and furniture type of scenario rather than built-in hard walls.
Right. But this entire second floor but is dedicated to the harbor master?
Correct.
Okay. Can we go to the first floor? Thank you. What about the large space on the bottom, towards the bottom there?
Well, that space will be controlled by the harbor master, but it's an opportunity for a welcoming desk. People are going to walk into this building and they're going to need to know, okay, where do I go for laundry facilities? Where do I go for public toilets? How do I get to the harbor master? And so there will be a traffic cop, if you will, at that front desk area that's shown there, the rectangle. We see this area as having the opportunity for some displays that maybe there's some brochures here, information about boating, educational information, workshop space potentially for boating safety, the types of things that they would want to do here to conduct their classes.
I'm referring to A101, that's where we are. Co-op BOH, little space in there, what does that mean? If you could point that out. Does anybody got a pointer?
That is back of house.
Back of house?
Yeah, BOH, back of house.
So it's just like a storeroom?
So it's storage.
Okay.
It's storage.
And
We
then the
think there's for chairs, for things that would go out on the deck.
Waterman's Co-op is actually outside the building.
Generally on the deck,
Yes.
what we've referred to as Waterman's Co-op, any materials they may need would be stored in that space. But it's really just storage for whatever programming may happen there.
Okay. I must say, if I could comment, there's a tremendous amount of public space in the first floor of this building. And on the second floor of this building, it's really dedicated to the harbor master. But there's the accessibility to this structure is profound. I mean, it's almost on every side. On three sides, for sure. And there are decks and there are balconies and there, when there's bad weather, there's going to be chairs inside or something. I mean,
It is. And, I think that accessibility is good, number one. Secondly, I think this will be the last building built on City Dock for a very long time. And that, we need to be able to get the functionality out of this building. We need to be able to accommodate more harbor master functions here, rather than less. And that is what we're doing. I think there's all kinds of opportunity for boating and Chesapeake Bay environmental educational programming. It's one of the things we heard very frequently in public meetings. And this is going to be able to happen at this location. It also will be a place where I think, the public can enjoy the space and sit in some shade under the deck, as well as in some of the seating that James pointed out earlier.
okay.
So there is space for the public to have a seat, relax inside the building where there are chairs for the public.
Yes.
What floor is that on?
On this first floor here, there is a small public lounge area here.
About how many people could that accommodate?
Call it 8, 10. I mean, it's not but so big, of course.
Yeah.
What about in the visitor area, the reception area?
Well, a lot of this programming is still being developed, but there are a lot more needs and for it probably than there is space. But all of that being mostly for conducting educational classes, which would be fantastic. I mean, all the types of things that they also do at the yacht club with their educational classes for boating, but that's just not open to the public, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I'll move on to Mr. Arison. I know you're familiar with him, and if you're not, his professional biography is under tab 9. Mr. Arison, introduce yourself once again to the Planning Commission, please.
My name is John Arison, 707 Glendon Avenue, Annapolis 21403, and I'm the principal of Arison and Associates, which is a land use consultancy.
How long have you been involved in the City Dock project?
This particular project, while it was underway, I led a table at one of the workshops, but my real heavy involvement, I've done City Dock plans in the past. There's been a lot of planning done at City Dock, as many of you well know. But I really got involved about a year ago to assist with zoning issues, with critical areas issues on an as-needed basis.
And in doing so, you were either already familiar with or are
made
familiar with the city code, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And how about the Annapolis Comprehensive Plan, known as the Plan 2040? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am. And as you know, I've prepared 2 comp plans for Annapolis. The first one in conjunction with Eileen back in '98, and another one in 2012. And I have read Annapolis Ahead Plan 2040.
Do you believe that this proposed project before the Planning Commission tonight is consistent with the current comprehensive plan?
Yes, I do. The commission has heard the testimony of the landscape architect and architect about all the effort that went into making it compatible. I will point out that the 2040 plan has no specific recommendations for this specific site. And the City Dock plan was completed, I think, in 2020, which is well in advance of the adoption of Plan 2040. So Plan 2040 relies a great deal on the City Dock action plans in terms of its recommendations. I mean, there's statements in the comp plan that say Ward 1 resilience and revitalization should be guided by the City Dock action plan. So they were able to reference it rather than get into great detail because of the enormous amount of effort that went into developing the action plan for City Dock.
So given your familiarity with the plan and what you have seen tonight, do you believe the design that we have presented to the Planning Commission achieves compatibility, safety, and efficiency, as well as attractiveness at this site?
Yeah, of course. If you look at context in terms of this building, the Burgess House is the context. I mean, the city has gone to great efforts over the last 15 or more years to try to figure out how to program the Burgess House, how to save it, and how to adaptively reuse it in some manner. When I was looking at the photograph, looking at Prince George Street, that showed the side of the Burgess House, if you notice the warehouse right behind it also has a shed roof. There are a lot of elements of this design that mimic not only respectfully of the Burgess House, but actually it lends a historic perspective as well. The comp plan advises us to grow in a way that assures public facilities and infrastructure are adequately sized and equipped to deliver exceptional services. I think it's important moving forward that, as Bryce pointed out, that this building is able to continue to be used and continue to be functional on into the future, because it's going to be there, and it's going to be there a long time, and it's going to be the Harbor Master building for a long time.
You've heard other observations about the compatibility of this proposed structure with adjacent structures?
Yes, I did.
What's your take on that?
I agree with those assessments. Plan 2040, I think, talks about enhance the public realm. Architecture should create places through distinctive design, building features, and side elements that are respectful of its area. And I think that this certainly does that. And I think we certainly heard testimony to that effect, and I don't want to be redundant just for the sake of people having to listen to me.
Well, take a moment, given your long involvement in Annapolis with respect to planning, what's your observation and what's your thought about how a project like this will impact the city of Annapolis?
This will have a positive impact on the city of Annapolis. If you look at the City Dock Action Plan, there are a number of work groups that dealt with a number of topics. But this area was mentioned in the Design and Placemaking Group, the Community Character Benefits Livability Work Group, and there was another Preservation Birders House Work Group with its own specific chapter. Each one of these groups has sort of different ideas as to how this should work. I mean, we have to keep in mind that plans and comp plans are aspirational and sometimes don't get into details of a specific building and how it's going to be programmed and how it's going to be used. But generally speaking, I came here in 1987. I was with the city from 87 to, I can't remember anymore, but it was a long time, some 2013, I think. When City Dock was talked about, and it's in these plans too, it was always, we got to open up the view by getting rid of the existing harbor master. That's been a consistent theme, whether it's been explicitly stated in a plan, it's been an underlying theme like that runs through everything. So that's going to happen. And the question is, where do we replace it? And this is a great location for it. This not only is able to preserve a piece of Annapolis history with the Birders House, it also provides a building that's going to be functional, multi-program now. It's not just a harbor master, it's an education center. Every time somebody comes up with something else that they would like to see in the building that makes sense, I think that's tried to be accommodated by the design team. So yes, it's definitely a benefit to the city of Annapolis to have this here.
You heard Mr. Jakubiak tell us that the Critical Area Commission has now approved this plan. They've made a determination that it's a water-dependent facility, so that's all good and done.
Yep.
My last question for you is whether this proposed project satisfies the criteria of zoning, the WMC Waterfront Maritime Conservation District. Does it meet all the requirements of that district?
With the critical area approval, it meets the requirements of the WMC district, it meets the requirements of the critical areas overlay, and it's designed in accordance with the historic preservation guidelines, including the height limits, which are code, they're not subjective determinations. And HPC still has to look at it and give their own input and approvals of this particular project.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arison. Mr. Chairman, that would conclude our case in chief.
Questions? Okay. Okay. I think we would like to open the public hearing now to testimony from anybody who wishes to testify. You don't need to be in favor or you don't need to be opposed. What we're interested in is the quality of your observations and suggestions. But when you do come to the podium, please, your name, your address, and please keep it short. It's 9:30. Okay? We all have somewhere to go at some point tonight, so.
Do we have a time limit?
Yes. I don't know who's going to keep track of it, but I would say 2 to 3 minutes is more than sufficient to say what you need to say. If you're speaking in behalf of an organization or an association, I'll give you a little more leeway because you're speaking on behalf of other people as well. So why don't you come forward and let's hear what oral testimony we have tonight. Take your time, everybody, there'll be time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Carl Snowden, representing the Caucus of African American Leaders. My address is 230 Garden Gate Lane, Annapolis, Maryland. I am very impressed with what I've heard and seen. I fully support this particular project. But I want to say something to those particularly new Annapolitans. I'm a native Annapolitan. I grew up in downtown Annapolis, lived at 10 Cornhill Street, 8 Pinckney Street, and roamed Fleet Street. Know the area very well. There are places and people who many Annapolitans who are new will not know. They will not know about the Ideal Hotel. They will never have heard of Joe's Tavern, Beanie's Bar. These were establishments that catered to the African Americans. What I like about this plan is it gives all Annapolitans an opportunity to enjoy the city dock. That has not always been the case. We're going to be celebrating this coming Monday, the 25th anniversary of the Kunta Kinte Alex Haley Memorial going downtown. And I just want people to understand the importance of having inclusion. In 1978, following the movie Roots, a group of citizens came to Annapolis City Council and asked that a plaque be placed in downtown Annapolis to honor Kunta Kinte. The Annapolis City Council, in its wisdom in 1978, said no. The mayor at the time, John Apostle, said Kunta Kinte was not an Annapolitan, not a Marylander, and even Historic Annapolis did not support it at that time. 3 years later, there was an election in the city of Annapolis. 2 men were running for the mayorship, and on the agenda was whether there should be a Kunta Kinte plaque. One candidate supported it, the other didn't. Fortunately, the candidate who supported it won, and of course, the Kunta Kinte plaque was later installed in downtown Annapolis. I think it's just very, very important, particularly for Native Annapolitans who happen to be people of color, that they feel that they are welcome down at the city dock. This plan, I think, does just that. So I want to thank each of the commissioners for the time that you spent on this. And I just want to conclude with this remark. Watching people spend hours and hours and hours sitting in meetings, you just have to commend the spirit of people in this city. They really do care. How many people you know would be coming to a meeting, not getting paid? Meeting started at 7:30, takes 2 hours before you get an opportunity to say a few words. So again, I just want to commend the commissioners for each of you just sitting, listening. Thank you for your work you do. Thank you for your service. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Raymond Tompkins. I live at 27233 Ridge Road, Damascus, Maryland. It's over an hour away from here. However, I am a proud military brat. I was born inside the Naval Academy in 1973 when they had the facility to do so. I've lived in various places across Eastport and Annapolis. I worked in the town probably when I was not legally able to work, and I won't name the places that I worked at. I cut my teeth at Chart House in the early 90s, and then now I am representing Latitude 38, which is the neighbor to the proposed building site, the closest neighbor. I remember when the mayor was my bartender. I've had a lot of good memories in this town. I love this town. I consider myself an Annapolitan, even though I do live out on a 100-acre farm surrounded by goats, cows, and chickens and pigs. I just wanted to get on record tonight, and I do want to say thank you for being here and allowing the public to present their opinions. what we heard from the panel was excellent. I loved everything that is being proposed. I think that it's going to lift up the city in a positive way. My only concern, and I have a couple folders for everybody. Is it okay if I get these passed around by someone? Okay, that'd be great. Is there anybody to pass them, or is, okay. And I don't know if I have enough for everybody. Here we go. Thank you. I'm not going to read the letter in its entirety since I know I'm going to respect time. Absolutely, sure. I do want to, when everybody has the folder, direct your attention to the photograph on the right-hand side. That was taken today. Yeah, you can give a couple of them. That was taken today from my cell phone. They say a picture says 1,000 words, but I think this is missing a couple things here. That view that we have from the deck at latitude 38 is awesome. I've been there since 2015. I still stop and pause with a coffee in my hand or nothing at all and look at the shimmering light on the harbor there, on the creek. What's been moving and what's been happening, and I've been to some meetings that are in the early stages, love listening to Eileen's vision, is I agree with what was said, that it's going to increase value and it's going to benefit everyone. The one thing that I do not agree with and I regret is part of the new plan, or the most recent plan, is the physical footprint of this museum, not museum, I'm sorry, but the Harbor Master Building and the Maritime Welcome Center. We at Latitude 38, I think I speak on behalf of all the employees, we love our view, and we would like to be included in some sort of discussion that would keep the view somewhat what it is now. I don't feel as though that discussion has happened. I am not aware of it if it has. And you know, just this week, we had a party of 5 that came to the restaurant, and we're only there for a few minutes, and then they left, or they were leaving, and I was there. I asked them why they were leaving, and they thought that we weren't close enough to the water. They want more water, which I agree. We do have a little bit of a parking lot in front of us, but you can still see plenty of water from our dining room tables. But that just goes to show you how important that view is to patrons. They want to see the water. They want to be able to look at it. Most of our patrons, I would like to think, love the view that they have when they dine there. And we would just like to preserve that. So I just wanted to put the letter on the left side and hope that it makes it to record, and hope that further discussions can take place before decisions are finalized.
I would like to place into the record the letter from Ray Tompkins and the photograph.
And I thank you for your time, and the presentation from the panel was excellent. It really was. Sorry, I gotta write my name and address here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. This is, my name is Cia Boccaccio. I am a 20-year...
Oh, can you state your address, please?
I'm sorry. What did you say? Address 206 Main Street, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. I am a 20-year-old owner of Alpaca International in Main Street. I opened my first store in 2004, and since then, the city has given me the opportunity to expand my brand and my company to 3 other states, Alaska and Utah. And I'm gonna speak about this project, and I wanna congratulate everybody involved, especially the mayor and the commission for this incredible visionary project. Bringing our waterfront alive is truly a project long overdue. Annapolis is defined for its waterfront, is defined for City Dock. And we are known as a waterfront community, in fact. And building a state-of-the-art waterfront facilities will make this experience even better, not only for the citizens, but also for everybody that comes to Annapolis to learn the tradition of the maritime experience and also to admire the beauty of the city. And therefore, this experience and this attraction that will increment the foot traffic and the weekend visitors, that will be immediately impacting to the economy of our city. In the personal level, I can assure you that my business will be impacted immediately when this project is done. Annapolis needs this improvement of the City Dock. Annapolitans needs it because we have a hard time to keep our own citizens, our own Annapolitans in downtown Annapolis and to come to impact economically to our businesses. This project will make it more attractive. It will define Annapolis better. It will make us feel more welcome to be downtown, therefore to walk around Main Street, and the impact, as you know, it will be immediate for businesses, restaurants, and businesses like mine. And I wanna, again, congratulate the mayor, the commission, for this incredible visionary project that is gonna have an immediate, a long-term impact for our community. Thank you very much.
Madam, would you please make sure that your name, your address, and your business name is on that list so we can keep a record of that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I must add that I have taken 2 hours of a very precious time during Midnight Madness, where I have my alpacas outside of my store to come and support this project, truly. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kleinschmidt, 1910 Town Center Boulevard. I am the president and CEO of the Anne Arundel County Chamber of Commerce. We have 500 businesses that are members of the chamber located throughout the county, but we've got about 225 that are located here in Annapolis. Quite a few are located along Main Street, Maryland Ave, and right on City Dock. And many are out doing Midnight Madness tonight, too. I was part of the City Dock Action Committee. Eileen, it's hard to believe it's been 5 years. But I co-chaired the Business Owners Subcommittee. And one of the things that's interesting about large public projects like this is balance. In order to have the balance between economic impact, environmental impact, historical impact, and community impact. And what you need is input. And I think this project has had no lack of input. What was it, over 150 meetings? So I think that there's been a consensus that this is something that's needed to happen. The concept about the plan tonight to maintain our focus is, the relocation of the Harbor Master building is key. And I think linking it to the historic Burgess House is pretty neat idea. Heard a lot about Annapolis and the value that we have as a waterfront town. So anything that we can do to accentuate that, and as Carl Snowden was talking about, the value that everybody has access to the water, and the whole City Dock project is important. This is the last piece of the puzzle that needs that final approval. And I think what it'll give us as a community and as a city is this place that's welcoming, where people can come to Annapolis on the water. So I think it's important to let's fast forward a little bit and let's get in the year 2050. Let's think about history and how people will look back at the history of what this project was and how it came to be. And those 4 impact areas and all the constituents that were involved in it had the time to comment and comment substantially. And the end result of this is a project that I think will be and is historic, not only for the way that it has preserved the history and the character of the town, but the way that it's preserved the environment and been innovative, particularly with sea level rise and what it's done with the resiliency, not only the end result of it, but the way that it's been financed. So from the Chamber's standpoint, we believe this project is a big winner, and we urge the Planning Commission to go ahead and approve this last piece of the overall project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Richards. I live a block away at 120 Duke of Gloucester Street, overlooking the harbor. And there's been some discussion about for the record. So for the record, back on your meeting at May 14th, I submitted the following written question. Since the Carbon Leadership Forum has found that reuse and retrofit of an existing building typically produces 50 to 75% less carbon than the construction of a new building, why isn't the city exploring the option of locating the Maritime Welcome Center in an underused harbor building that already exists? That question wasn't answered on May 14th, and to my knowledge hasn't been answered since. So, for the record, I oppose the approval of the Maritime Welcome Center because it consumes precious public open space on the harbor without any meaningful consideration of the environmentally preferred solution of using existing structures to accommodate any necessary or desirable functions proposed for the Maritime Welcome Center. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Sears. I'm the manager of the Sir Speedy Printing at 90 West Street. I 100% agree with the new Welcome Center. I think it's going to be a great addition to the city. The elevation of bringing the land up to avoid the flooding is going to be the biggest concern. As I have customers downtown, I walk down there all the time to make deliveries to them. Quite a few times I've had to have knee boots to get to them. And it's just one of the biggest concerns that I've had, and I think with the elevation and what you're trying to do would be a big help to prevent the flooding.
Good evening, Chairman Walden, distinguished members of the Planning Commission. My name is Zoe Johnson, Miss Johnson, as referred to earlier. I am the Facilities Management Division Director and Community Planning Liaison at Naval Support Activity Annapolis, which is home of the Naval Academy, as you know. I'm here tonight representing Installation Commander Christopher Schwartz, who's unable to join you but sends his regards. We want to thank you for the opportunity to continue to participate and engage with the city in many of the many planning meetings that have been held since 2019. As you know, the Naval Academy was actively involved in the City Dock Action Committee. I co-chaired the Resiliency Work Group along with city members for the sole purpose of developing a strong partnership between the city and the Navy on addressing both coastal flooding and sea level rise. We both started with planning, envisioning, and now both the city as well as the Naval Academy are working towards specifically actually executing and constructing specific infrastructure projects to reduce risk and plan for the future. As you know, we share a fence line. We're immediately adjacent to Prince George Strait, and we are happy to report this evening that our design for our flood wall at 9.7 feet above mean sea level, NAVD 88, has been designed to 100%, and our funding is programmed for award in 2025 during this fiscal year. So sometime between now and September 30th, 2025, we will have on the street a request for proposals for the construction of our flood wall along Prince George Strait. Our design has incorporated a tie-in with the city's City Dock flood wall, and our design incorporates the tie-in based on plans that we received from the city in about April 2024, and then you've seen tonight. So I would just urge, we've submitted comments for the record, written comments, but I would just urge any sort of consideration or rethought or reconfigurating where that tie-in goes with that you've seen in the sort of that Prince George Street Park should be carefully considered, as we don't want it to sort of compromise the design that we've finalized, and now our design consultants are no longer under contract. We are moving forward with awarded that or putting out the RFP, as I mentioned. So would like to try to the greatest extent possible reduce any need for redesign at taxpayers' expense. Additionally, we have respectfully requested, and the city and their design team has been very gracious to continue to work with us to adhere the design to maintain compliance with the Unified Facilities Codes, both our clear zone and our ATFP setback requirements off the Prince George Strait flood wall. We do not, those design guidelines for clear zones and setbacks are not a requirement for any adjacent property. We work through a liaisoning with private residents as well as other government entities to try and work together to ensure we can maintain those sight lines. In the event we cannot, we make mitigations with inside of our fence line. It's more problematic down in and around Halsey Fieldhouse because we don't have a lot of opportunity to increase the width of the clear zone. It would require, if we can't meet it on the outside of the fence line, it may precipitate the need for us to make modifications inside of Halsey Fieldhouse itself. My comments and our comments have been entered into the record, but I just wanted to reiterate that we have had a long-standing, very supportive partnership with the city when it comes to flood control and coastal flooding. And we look forward to continue working with the city to see both of our projects for flood control and sea level rise move forward for the years to come. Thank you.
Do you foresee any problem in a seamless connection?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
No.
Secondly, do you see any possibility in the future for opening Gate Zero?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I get paid to ask difficult questions.
Yes. I'm not surprised by the question. We have heard and we have received a request for consideration of that recently. It is something we have, are open to talking to the city about and actively, working to explore. But at this point in time, I can't speak to whether or not our leadership supports that endeavor.
Well, I can only hope that Mrs. Fogarty and you live long lives and you can come to an agreement on this, because that would be an amazing promenade.
And for the record, my work address is 181 Wainwright Road, Annapolis, Maryland, 21402.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson.
Quick question.
Yes.
So design standard, you said 9.7 feet,
Above NAVD 88.
right? And then how does that compare here? Because I think it was 8 feet, right? Okay, do we foresee any difficulties or problems because of this? Okay.
The one aspect which I think is worth mentioning, because I don't want it to catch anybody off by surprise when you see our plans and our design drawings, is we have two design heights that have been incorporated into our flood wall. One is a flood control height, which is 9.7 feet above NAVD 88, which is a vertical datum.
Yep.
For flood control purposes. The other is a physical security height of our wall to prevent anybody from scaling our wall. And that's 8 feet above, mean grade. And so where the Burtis House patio or promenade or what park, thanks, when you come between Burtis House and the Prince George Street, where the Naval Academy, property boundary is, our wall will have an additional segment on top made of wrought iron to accommodate the additional height, because the grade of the park is about 6 feet. Does anybody know? 6.5 feet. So in the section of the park, we still need to maintain a physical security barrier of 8 feet. So while our 9.7 foot flood wall is based off a vertical datum of NAVD 88, our security barrier height is based off grade. So there may be portions of the wall that are higher based on the physical security requirements of height versus the flood control height, if that makes sense.
It does. Is there a reason why you're using an AVD 88 versus grade D 22?
For all of our flood control purposes, when we established our resilience plan at the Naval Academy, all of our flood control heights are based off NAVD 88.
Okay. And have you done the conversion to the new datum?
No, we have not.
Okay. Thank you. There's actually NASA released a new datum that most are supposed to be going to.
The what?
NASA and USGS released a new vertical datum. So NAVD 88 is kind of going out the door, and incoming is grade D 22. That's why I asked about that.
Sir.
Good evening. My name is Ray Williams. I'm a local waterman in Eastport here at 726 2nd Street. And with the new program that's going, it looks like that it's going to be more open to watermen to get back, to be able to come downtown. Because in reality, we've been shut out as a waterman, as a fisherman, oysterman, or whatever. It don't exist anymore. It's like you pull up and you're like, oh, well, you're not a pleasure boat. You got to go. I've had it happen to me. And I think what I see here really looks good. And thanks to the mayor, Gavin Buckley, I mean, he told me about it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm real interested in this. I was there probably a few months ago doing a fundraiser for him, shucking oysters, and I backed my boat right in one of them holes right I'm looking at right now. And they said, no, you can't go over there. You got to go over here. I said, well, the mayor told me to come over here. I'm just doing what I'm told. What do you want me to do, you know? But I'm like, I'm just here to say, as a waterman, something needs to be done. And I think you're going in the right direction. But I think nobody thinks about that anymore. They go to the restaurants, oh, I need a half a dozen oysters. I need this or I need that. But where did they really come from? Okay? I'm getting out of here because I got to be up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning to go to work. But I just want to say, I think this is an awesome thing here. And I wish somebody would just wake up and just listen and look at what they're doing. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Rachel Robinson. I'm representing Historic Annapolis tonight at 18 Pinckney Street. After reviewing the application and staff report, we have the following comments for your consideration. The resiliency and visual improvements at the end of Prince George Street with flood mitigation and elevated landscape design are one of the better design aspects of the City Dock project. This will improve the environment around and protection of the historic Burtis House, improve the pedestrian experience at the waterfront terminus of Prince George Street, and improve the physical and visual connection between the historic district and its neighbor, the Naval Academy. Number two, as you, the Planning Commission, review the Maritime Welcome Center, please note that this is the first public hearing that the public has had the ability to comment on this current design of the Maritime Welcome Center, which is a major addition to the Burtis House. HA believes that the above-grade structure as proposed is 2 times too big and overwhelms the Burtis House, despite the staff report. We disagree that the bulk of the addition fits compatibly with the Burtis House. HA normally does not comment on proposed use. However, the vacillating uses of the addition and the Burtis House have inflated the size of the addition, which is unwarranted in our opinion. We disagree that with the staff report that the Maritime Welcome Center is mainly in line with the existing row of commercial buildings, reinforces rather than disrupts the existing building patterns. This block of Dock Street has 2 19th century buildings as bookends to the 20th century infill, and it reflects a variety of styles and massing. The unifying feature to this variety is that the existing buildings maintain the street or block face. The Maritime Welcome Center projects past this plane and interrupts the pedestrian end of Dock Street. The inclusion of a full basement in the Maritime Welcome Center is unnecessary in both use and expense, impractical for users, and undermines common sense resiliency at this location on the water's edge. And finally, number 3, the City Dock project at large is a critical resiliency and hazard mitigation effort that will provide flood barrier protection, stormwater management, and as an added benefit, an attractive open space where today there is surface parking. Protection of City Dock will preserve the coastal edge of the historic district. We strongly encourage the city to also make Annapolis's largest infrastructure project in history a green as well as resilient project. This project should include creative adaptive reuse of the existing Harbor Master building, which is not too late since the project requires electrical equipment at that site and the community has consistently requested public bathroom facilities there too. There should be more energy resilient and sustainable elements as well. Let's make this City Dock project resilient and sustainable in every possible way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Kristen Peronis. I'm the Executive Director with Visit Annapolis in Anne Arundel County. Our address is 26 West Street. Hey, Bryce, can I ask you to show a picture up on the screen? I know it's not my presentation, but it really helps. It's the one that shows the current Harbor Master with the Visitor Center kiosk in front. So we are, as Visit Annapolis in Anne Arundel County, the destination marketing and management organization for the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. And what that means is on the marketing side, it is our job to bring visitors into our destination to enjoy all that we have to offer, right? So we brought in 2023, almost 7 million visitors, about $4.1 billion of impact. And so when people talk about Midnight Madness tonight, that's what we're talking about, that economic impact. But that's not what I want to talk about the marketing side today. I want to talk about the management side. Destination management, once we advertise out and get these visitors in, we've got to make sure when they get here, we live up to that promise that we've made in our marketing. So it is our job to make sure that visitor comes here and has a great experience. And when they do that, they'll come back and they'll tell their friends. In addition to that, our job is to make sure that that doesn't conflict with our residents, that we make sure that we're increasing the quality of life for our residents. So we really have to balance that management and that marketing side of things. It's that management side that I want to talk about today. We have a footprint currently at City Dock as Visit Annapolis in Anne Arundel County. And while we appreciate the city giving that to us and for a very, very small amount of rent, it's subpar. It is a small footprint. It is not welcoming. It doesn't have amenities. It doesn't have anything. In fact, that little booth right there in that bottom corner, the visitor stands on the outside, our staff stands on the inside, our volunteers are on the inside. That's not welcoming, that's not interactive. You think about that, it's dark outside, we can't be open. It's cold outside, we can't be open. It's raining outside, we can't be open. So we can't service the visitor like we should. We're really excited about the idea of having a footprint in the Waterfront or Maritime Welcome Center, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to vote for Waterfront Welcome Center because people understand what that is more, and it really talks about the location, but that's a conversation for another day and the signage there. So I want to sort of end with two things. One is I had a mentor really early in my career, Naval Academy class of 1980, Janie Mine. She was in the first class of women, and we were getting into a pretty big debate at the Naval Academy, and she said, do you want to make a point or do you want to make a difference? I think we're making a lot of points right now, but I don't think we're making a difference for our community, and I think we have to come together. Last night, I had the opportunity to go to the annual meeting for Historic Annapolis, and they had a speaker there. Her name was Carol Quillen, and she was informational and inspirational, and she was actually quite funny too, and I have to admit that I don't always think the people that are in preservation are funny, and she really was. She told a little sort of anecdote I'll say is, preservationists are known to say no to everything, and she was pretty funny about that, like no, 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 no. But what she really came to was saying preservationists and the community need to come together to say yes to transformational projects that can really bring our community together and figure out how to do it together. And I think that that's where we are right now. I think we're at a point that we know we need to do something at City Dock, and I can tell you we really want a footprint there. We're willing to come to the community, to the table, to make sure that we can make that difference, and maybe we can get past just making points. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. My name is Karen Timer Brown. I'm the president and CEO of Historic Annapolis, and I live at 2 Ridge Road. Interestingly enough, I wanted to speak about Carol Quinlan, our speaker from our keynote from our annual meeting last night. She's the president and CEO of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And as Kristen said, she waxed poetically about the importance of Annapolis, the beauty of buildings, and the serenity of scale, but she also did speak about the yes of preservation, how preservation can inspire economic vitality of an area, how preservation can help sustain the planet, and the importance of preserving the particularity and the beauty of places that we love so much so that future generations can experience them. So many of those sentiments can be related to this project, most notably the opportunities that this project presents to make our historic core more resilient and to beautify this space within its historic context. And Historic Annapolis, we have said repeatedly that we fully support resiliency effort and we look at the bigger picture, how strengthening our shoreline preserves the integrity of our nationally important historic landmark district. But we continue to have concerns about elements of this plan, most notably the Maritime Welcome Center that is 2 times too big, that it detracts from the historic structure to which it's attached. It is not subordinate, it is not deferential, and it projects beyond the rhythm of the Dock Street setback. And again, to echo the Trust's comments about how preservation can sustain the planet, we question how by removing a 50-year-old building and replacing with a larger building on the water's edge represents green, resiliency, and sustainability planning. While some may question the Harbor Master Building's architectural merit, the reuse of an old building is an inherent sustainable practice. It capitalizes on embodied energy in a structure, it reduces carbon footprints and building materials in landfills. That building could be modified, adaptively reused, repurposed, and/or recycled into bathrooms and/or provide space to house some of the many uses that the city has attributed to the new building, and therefore reduce the size of this overscaled new construction on the water's edge. Investigating adaptive reuse of underutilized properties in the immediate vicinity is without question a greener solution, a more environmental solution. So as preservationists, we do say yes to the Prince George Street Park and the associated resiliency plan, and we're very excited about the activation of the Captain Burtis House. However, demolishing the existing Harbor Master and the development of the Maritime Welcome Center really should be reevaluated. This will not slow down the more pressing and imminent resiliency needs, which wholeheartedly, again, we support. Annapolis really deserves the best solution, a preservation solution, and a sustainable solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pete Chambliss. I live at 121 Prince George Street, Annapolis 21401. I want to thank you all for your presentations. It was indeed enlightening and amazing that we've come this far in so many years. Urban planning is a process of directing and guiding the use and development of the urban environment, infrastructure, and services in a city to ensure economic development, quality of life, natural resource management, and efficient operation of the infrastructures for sustainable and attractive urban living. As planners charting the future of Annapolis, you're taking into consideration a variety of factors, listening to the public comment, which you have, legal and zoning considerations, economic impact, both positive and negative, and as many factors as possible that will leave the city in a better position than it was before. Perhaps in the case of Annapolis, we should also add architectural continuity to the above definition. As part of it, that is what draws people to this city, call it colonial charm or whatever, but that's part of our urban planning as well. Remember the debacle we had rebuilding of 110 Compromise Street, faucets, now Chop Tank, the Ordan project raised a real stink, a steel and glass monstrosity right on the water. I think we can learn from the past and we don't want to repeat it. You've heard about the meeting sponsored by Historic Annapolis that was basically an open microphone for citizens to express their opinions on the City Dock Resiliency and Development Program. The process started a great deal of conversation, and to a person, there was no objection to the resiliency plan. The objections that were voiced focused on the Burtis House and the Maritime Welcome Center. How many of you read the 6 pages of concerns that your residents have put down regarding not just resiliency, but the hotel, the center, the height and bulk of the design and operations, but also the needs for convenient toilets, unfair competition to the restaurants with a half-baked concept of free oysters, and a meeting room where one hotel about 100 yards away from the proposed center sells meeting rooms. That's called economic development. Read the concerns of your citizens. I think this plan, you've come a long way, but the devil is in the details, and there are a lot of devils lurking in the Welcome Center part of this project that adequate and thorough planning can take care of. So erase the Welcome Center from your plans and get on with the resiliency. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Craig Harrison. I live at 264 King George Street in Annapolis, and I'm the president of the Ward 1 Residents Association. Over the last several months, we've been working closely with Karen and Rachel on what is going on. We had an open forum at the Peka House to discuss this, and we had a series of questions which we submitted that we thought were pretty insightful and thoughtful, and we never got any answers to them. We heard a lot tonight, and we appreciate that. We do agree that there's a lot that can be done before we put in a new Welcome Center, whether you want to call it the Maritime Welcome Center or the Waterfront Welcome Center, which we think makes some sense too. But we do have a building that's there now, and it can be modified as opposed to going ahead and building a new building. We think that that makes a lot of sense. We're not really crazy about the fact that the restrooms are at the end of the city dock. So somebody's downtown, they've got to go to Middleton's or to McGarvey's to use a restroom. And we don't really think we need to have a laundry in there for people with boats when less than 8% of the visitors to Annapolis are coming in there to do the laundry on boats. And also, we do not think that the entire structure that's been presented now is consistent with the entire architecture of the historic area. And as the residents here who are going to see this every day, we are very concerned about it. And I can't support what Historic Annapolis has said earlier and what Chris just mentioned now, that we're in total support with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How y'all doing? My name is Lavelle Offer, 8 Gilmore Street, Annapolis, Maryland. I work for the mayor's office, violence prevention program. no harm. I pretty just want to talk about like the history of Annapolis. I've been living in Annapolis my whole life, in like the low income neighborhoods, I never really knew much about the water. Like this, I lived here my whole life. I never really felt like we were free to go like downtown and stuff like that. You get what I'm trying to say? And a lot of the history of Annapolis has been pushed away for the black community in Annapolis. They don't really know our history. So this gives us, I would like for y'all to build this because it gives us the opportunity to do different stuff in Annapolis as far as presenting the black history in Annapolis. Okay, like for instance, I got this book right here. I want y'all should check this book out. It's called Working Waterfront, A Maritime History of Annapolis, Chesapeake Bay. And in this book, it describes that black men were very prominent in this area as far as being fishermen. A lot of the stuff that was built off of these guys that worked real hard in the water. They were called, I'm gonna get this book off. Okay, so they were the black skipjacks of the water, right? So in the time when they put them slides up, a lot of this city was built off fishing and stuff like that. A lot of those buildings were for fishing and stuff like that, right? So, but if you don't know that, it's been wiped away. The history for black people have been pretty much wiped away. The only thing that you see when you go downtown is a Kunta Kinte statue. That represents slavery. But these guys represent business owners. You get what I'm trying to say? They represented more than just slavery. The same water that they were brung here on, they got their freedom from sailing. A lot of these guys got paid a lot of money. The money that they got, they lived in the Eastport community. They used that same money to rebuild the Eastport community. These guys got their freedom through they were so good on the water, it got to the point where 80% of the fishermen in Annapolis were black. Don't nobody even really know that. To the point where these guys took they took the money that they was using to catch crabs and fish and stuff like that to build the Eastport community. We wouldn't even know that. Most of the houses over Eastport were built by these people. We wouldn't even know that. You see what I'm saying? And all of that is pretty much erased in downtown. And that's all I'm asking, that if y'all do, when you do put this building up, put some of this history in here so these kids can know that a lot of this stuff was built from black people. They don't even know that. They don't even feel comfortable to come downtown, really. You see what I'm saying? So that's all I ask that you do when you do build this. If you're thinking about the history of Annapolis, just make sure that you add that in there. That's all I ask.
Sir.
All right, thank you.
We've already approved the park. Sir, hold on. So I guess I can make comments about the park itself without prejudging what's before us tonight. Let me just say that if you would be in touch with Ms. Fogarty before the two of you leave, she will put you in touch with a group that is responsible for the culture and history and what's to be in place to communicate some of the things that you've communicated tonight. So if the two of you could trade names and phone numbers, I think it might be productive.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Also, Mr. Offer, if you could make sure you put your first name and your address on the yellow paper there. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
But by the way, I wanted to announce that there's some sad news that came about within the last few weeks, and that is the death of Vincent Leggett. Vince Leggett was, he was a very I wouldn't say powerful, but I would say persistent force in bringing to light some of the things that this gentleman talked about, and was one of the real forces behind getting the Elktonian Cars Beach property purchased and made part of the city park system. He was a great man. Thank you.
Good evening,
Evening.
Commissioners. My name is Carl Larkin. I live at 154 Prince George Street. I was first involved in the project when it was being formulated. Met with Ms. Fogarty and others when we were trying to determine how long a project of this size might take. And the focus, of course, was on the water barriers and the park. There was very little discussion about a visitor center or what we might do with the Burtis House. Now that proceeded with the formation then of the committee that's been boasted about being so 100 people involved, and it was the 150 meetings that they've had. I can relate to you guys because you're volunteers. Most of us that are speaking here this evening are volunteers. We're not part of the team that's been hired to do the job on behalf of the mayor. So for that, I commend you for your commitment to the residents of Annapolis. Now, the thing that I would focus your attention on is we did have the 150 meetings, but you're the second largest, you've allotted the second amount of time for residents to speak of any of the 150 meetings. I didn't attend all of them. I probably attended 30 of them, maybe not 30, 20 of them. But the meetings are typically like this. You've already allowed 45, almost an hour for public to speak. Typically, the public gets about 15 minutes at most. The exception to that was what the Historic Annapolis has done in conjunction with the Ward 1 Residents Association, where they had heard enough presentations. They simply wanted to know, what did the residents think? They formulated a list of what the residents' comments were, and you just heard President of Ward 1 say they never got any response to what the residents have suggested and made. So I encourage you to be guided by the recommendations that are being made by Ward 1 and the Historic Preservation Commission, because they have the input from the residents that you're serving. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Katie McDermott. I live at 50 Franklin Street in the Historic District. I want to thank you all for your time and commitment. I've attended many of the meetings, including the working meetings in the spring and the fall. I've heard these presentations several times, and I do understand and appreciate the energy, expertise that's been brought to it. I'd like to make comments to what was said here today. First, none of the exhibits or the staff report explain or resolve the issue of, does this building promote or advance resiliency? In fact, in the staff report and the testimony from the city, it was suggested the building was essential to resiliency, and maybe I'm misquoting it, I hope I'm not. The video will show, but this building isn't essential to resiliency or sustainability at all. And these exhibits and a very well-prepared testimony don't show that. None of these exhibits or testimony or the staff report resolve the contradictory purposes of this building. Some of new ones we heard even tonight. Back in the April meeting, we heard about oyster bars and undefined spaces, could be commercial spaces, kayaking operations, even though the Maritime Commission has recommended that that not occur. And tonight we hear about education, like private yacht clubs, and it does look like a very Tony private yacht club. The staff report makes many references to the city dock Action Committee report. But notably, no one's made that an exhibit at this hearing. And Mr. Chairman, I urge you to request that that be made an exhibit. Because if you read it and you look at it, you'll see that the design you're voting on today isn't the so-called consensus that folks had 5 years ago. And that has really been, frankly, I think, a bit of a misrepresentation I hear at every meeting I go to. Read it, make it an exhibit. Why didn't they make it an exhibit? Why didn't the staff make it an exhibit in their report, since they said it promotes compliance with the so-called comprehensive plan? The staff report said there's been no public comment. False. There's been lots of public comment about this project, and it's controversial, and for good reason, because putting a big building on the water's edge in a treacherous flood area doesn't make common sense, no matter how pretty it is. You ask the question, is this the right location for the building? Right location for the building is, with all due respect, the wrong question. A new building on the water's edge is not the right location if resiliency and sustainability is the public goal in an era of climate change. This is not a private development. It's about the public interest. And this very well-done presentation and the record isn't going to show you that it advances the essential goal of resiliency. Hard questions have not been asked, and they've not been asked by many folks in many of these meetings. There's a lot of cheerleading about this, how great it looks, more tourism. But those aren't the right questions, and those aren't the hard questions, with all due respect. At the bottom, this building is in search of a real public need and purpose, and none of these exhibits or this very minimal staff report or testimony show otherwise. So I urge you, as just a citizen, to sail against the wind and vote no. Send it back for reevaluation if you've been encouraged to do. Put some integrity into the idea of resiliency and sustainability. And don't just rubber stamp this. A Tony Yacht Club for tourism is not visionary. It's just Old Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you.
What did she call it? A tiny yacht club for tourists?
Good evening, all. My name is Mike Tomasini. I'm a resident of Eastport, 212 Eastern Avenue. I'm also a small business owner of a maritime business, also out of Eastport and 3rd Street. I think the Welcome Center is a great idea, and I know that there are a lot of people who are against it. The private yacht club pitch is an interesting one because I kind of view it as it could be the people's yacht club. There are not a lot of spaces for us as residents of the city to enjoy improved municipal spaces, and it's an opportunity for us as a city to embrace something that's different than some of our coastal neighbors have done, like the Newports or Charleston's, where the closest public restrooms are a 15-minute run away from the waterfront. I think the idea of welcoming people to the actual water's edge, to the view, and then providing them the services they need at that point are the most important. When Ray was talking about shucking oysters, if people wanted to go see the catch on the dock, they would have to risk running down there and missing it because they wanted to run back to the restroom. I think our space, the beating heart of the city, is right there at the water's edge. And the further we remove those services and the availability of those services to the public, and including us, including the residents of the city, I think we're making a mistake. So I know that there are people who have thoughtful concerns about the design and the architecture of the space, placement, and form following function, all of that included in this. I really think that we have an opportunity as a city to put something special there that is going to engage the public in the place where they want to be. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
My name's Kevin Buckley.
and I live at 6 Stewart Avenue. And I want to commend, I'm a Ward 1 resident, so when Craig gets up here and says he represents Ward 1, he does not represent Ward 1. There has been no vote put to Ward 1 about this facility, about the park. And I want to commend Historic Annapolis because they are the protectors of the parking lot. In 2013, Josh Cohen, Mayor Cohen, tried to put forward a plan to reimagine the waterfront. And the exact same players who are here today, they're complaining about this project, are the same people that shot it down in 2013. They should be ashamed. We are trying to build a public space for the next generation. We're trying to do something that is accessible to everyone. And we have a group of people that do not want more people coming to City Dock, do not want to share the waterfront. We have an opportunity to correct that now. If you look at some of the speakers that came in today, they've never felt welcomed at the waterfront. They see ideas that really are relatable to them, and we should all consider that when we make our decisions. So I just want to thank you for all the work that's gone into this. This is a hugely important project for the city, not only the Welcome Centre, and you can support the old Harbour Master's office, and you can use the environment as your excuse or whatever excuse you want to do, because if that doesn't work, there'll be another excuse. We can't build the flood protection because it's only 70% design. We've had every other excuse possible to try to derail this project, and we know what's at the core of that. So please consider what's best for all Annapolis. It's what we do when we are in government. We have to do the most good for the most people, not just an elite group of people. So thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else getting up ready to speak after that. So I will then close the public hearing. It is now 10:30. I'd like to know from my fellow commissioners if we think we can deliberate and carry through tonight.
Yep.
Okay, so we may be here for a while. Who would like to start the discussion?
I'll jump in. Well, in general, and I said this at our last work session, but I think the design is great. And first of all, it is a little different from what people might think about what Annapolis is. And yeah, sure, it's not brick buildings, but to me, there are a couple of salient features here. One, I think the Harbor Master's office belongs at the water. The Maritime Welcome Center belongs at the water. I've been to a lot of harbors in this country by boat, and having that at the water is really where that needs to be. And the Harbor Master being right on the water, I can't speak for the Harbor Master, but I think that's where they need to be. And I think one of the things about it is the design of, we've already been through the park and everything, but the location of the Maritime Welcome Center next to the Burtis House brings a reason for people to walk down there. And for all of the things that were mentioned about it being welcoming, giving, Annapolitans, perhaps people who don't have access to private spaces on the water, the ability to have the same kind of experience that you might have in a private space is really valuable. And that's what's going to get people to walk all the way down to the end. And right now, nobody, maybe they walk down Susan Campbell Park, but it's not particularly attractive. And, I think without it, the Burtis House would end up just being another forgotten museum. And I really think the two of them together is really what's going to make that work. And the things we've talked about in the past, the circulation, the pedestrian experience, all of that is terrific. And the only thing that I could quibble about perhaps is, there need to be more smaller bike racks around, because sticking bike racks over in a corner, nobody's going to do that. They're going to put their bike where they stop to do whatever they're going to do. So take that as a thing to think about, is have lots of onesie-twosie bike racks around, not one big thing, over the corner that nobody's going to use. So that's my only quibble about that. In general, I think the intensity of the building in that space, as we've seen in a couple of these pictures here, is not anywhere near as intense as it was, 100, 125 years ago. It's actually still pretty sparse. We still have a lot of open space. We can quibble about whose view is better. Is it a little different? It's just a little bit different, but it's not completely, covered with buildings. But I think the design of it really fits with those examples, and ultimately gives us the opportunity to fix basically 100 years of devaluation of the most valuable space in the city, by it being essentially a parking lot that was sort of driven by the dogma of the automobile era. And I'm not an anti-car guy, but utilizing the best space that you have in the city for what it is now I think has devalued all of that land in the private buildings in businesses there. And with getting people out to the end is going to be, frankly, is going to be a windfall for those private property owners. Let's face it, that's what's going to happen here. So, I think all in all, I support this 100%. I don't know what else to say other than I'm ready to vote. I still do have, frankly, I still do have some concerns with how hard it's going to be to maintain the underground portion of the building. And I've asked Bert these questions many times, but you can engineer anything. It's just a question of how much effort that's going to be. But well, I'll take the experts' words for it there. So anyway, that's what I have to say. And I have, perhaps when we get to this point, a possible condition that I'd like to put on the approval.
I think it's a beautiful design building, and the emphasis on trying to bring the public down towards the water in comfortable, pleasant space is an excellent proposal. There's one. Let me start over. I think it's a beautiful design building, and I like the aspect of bringing the public down toward the water to enjoy all the features there and having space for them to do a variety of things. But there's one thing I would like to hear, since this is my first meeting, there's one thing I would like to hear addressed. Maybe you've discussed this, you've had many, many meetings, obviously, it's been said many times here this evening, is how involved was the discussion of trying to do something with the existing building? And why was that not an avenue to take? Retrofit the building, minimize the carbon footprint or whatever, and so forth. So for my own personal benefit, I would like to hear some background on that.
We'll get to that. I'll bring it up.
Just a quick question here. So the height of the roof is what, 29.3?
Yeah, so it's 32 feet allowed, and then it's approximately 29.3.
And the existing Harbor House is 29, right? So it fits, right? So what about not latitude 38, but the structure that's on the other side of latitude 38? How tall is that building?
Several of those are taller. I'm not sure which one is.
Yeah, that's essentially what I'm getting to. We heard a comment regarding the height and not fitting in. I was just ensuring that we are talking about the fact that it is actually height. It fits in with
shorter than some of the buildings.
Shorter than some of the buildings in the area, right? Okay, I just want to make sure we got that accurate. Yeah, like probably the other one is, so when we're looking at the first floor elevation there, what is the elevation of the first floor? I know that it is elevated from the Waters Way. What is that elevation?
We're building 7, with elevation 7.
Okay, so the water,
Above sea level, which is required by city code.
yeah, yeah,
The minimum.
perfect. And will that first floor be essentially waterproofed? So if water does get in there?
Well, it will be, but it will be behind the flood
Perfect, okay.
wall.
Got it. Yeah, no, I mean, there's little things that, sure, like as we're going through, that you know, as you said over there, sir, that we just want to make sure that are done right to ensure that that underground area is properly waterproofed, all these things. But I do see that it fits in with that area. I think that, sure, we've heard one comment here, again, latitude 38, regarding it blocking some of their view of the water. They still have view of really the Eagle Alley, and I think that it will be a net positive with the number of people coming down, that even if they lose a couple to not being able to see that one corner, they're going to get way more from that endpoint. I think that we can say that with pretty good certainty. So I think this is a good project. I think that when we look at resiliency projects, and I work in, in my full-time job, I work resiliency. We look at a project, what something is, and we look at what the project is, and we look at the net benefit or loss. The idea of subsecting one specific area and saying, well, that one specific area is not necessarily better than that the pre-state is not the way that is appropriate to look at projects, but is the overall project more resilient than the current situation? And I think that it is. So yeah, I'm in favor of this.
The amount of community outreach has been extraordinary. The opportunities to comment on this from beginning to end have been extraordinary. I have never seen in my 25 years on this planning commission so many opportunities for citizens to comment, whether they're in community meetings or ward meetings or work sessions in this room or hearings in this room. There was reference made to 6 pages of questions and comments and observations from the Ward 1 Residents Association. Was not submitted. I've never seen it. I can't respond to it. So I think to say that we're moving too quickly towards a conclusion without community input is a misstatement. This is not the first opportunity that people have had to testify. With respect to its conformance with community character and the various factors that we need to approve or disapprove or consider, one of the ones that came up that was observed tonight was, it's not in line with the existing buildings. Well, it's also not in line with the old A&P building, which is in the first block of Dock Street, that sticks out. And I would also point out that so much of Ward 1 in the Historic District is made up of building lines that move in and out, and it's the variety that makes the place so attractive. You know, maybe variety is the spice of life, and the amount that this building would protrude from the existing building line of that one block is, in my mind, minimal. And when I say in my mind, what I'm pointing out is that there have been various aesthetic complaints, criticisms, and observations. And aesthetics is a very difficult thing to decide. And a lot of people spent a lot of time over the past 2,000 years trying to determine what is beauty. One way to look at this project is to say, does the form in some way make elegant the functions. And I'll get to that in a second. Is it overscaled? I think that question has been answered. It is the same size as the existing Harbor Master building, essentially. Does it overpower the Burtis House? No. It's behind the Burtis House. It's connected to the Burtis House. Is it too modern? Well, you know, down there on City Dock, you've got this big hotel that was built. It's not historic. You've got the Fleet Reserve Club. Not historic, kind of modern, you know, 50s, 60s maybe. You've got this building that used to be faucets. You know, there's now the chop tank that just sticks out over everything. Hulks, it's bulky. We could have had something that was built away from the water with terraces and pedestrian walkways and a much better circulation. But there was objection to it, and a mayoral election, and we lost an opportunity to have engaged collaboratively, as this project has been done, in a much better building than exists now. Should we reuse the existing Harbor Master building? Well, one of the testimonians here tonight said, let's think about 2050. Okay, let's think about 2050. Do we want that squat red brick building that is non-functional inside, that protrudes into what can be an enormous public space for everybody that we've been frankly waiting for, and that has total consensus inside this room and out? In other words, I'm talking about the new park. So should we retain that building? Yeah, the carbon cost of building new buildings is probably more than retaining and reusing buildings, but sometimes, you know, you just got to change it, because that building in 2050 would be a pile of mud. Whereas you have an opportunity to build a building which is, at this point, in this stage in our evolution, environmentally conscious. The existing Harbor Masters building is in the view shed. It's in the pedestrian, it's an obstruction to pedestrian walking, and it doesn't work. Whereas the advantages to this building which is proposed are that the Harbor Master has the entire second floor, that the Harbor Master has, at this point, with this building, a view of the entire harbor rather than only of Ego Alley, that it can configure its activities in a modern way rather than being constrained in the old building that's such as it is. So it makes sense for that incredibly water-dependent activity to have this building on that spot and the Harbor Master in the entire second floor, and for in terms of the water dependency that this building needs to show in order to protrude into the critical areas, the basement. Annapolis is known as a way stop for boats. Annapolis is known as a place where you can get a boat fixed. Annapolis is known as a place where you can sell a boat and buy a boat. Annapolis is known as a place where you can sail a boat. Annapolis is known as a place where you can store a boat. But if you're passing through, you need that welcoming, as the welcome lady said, and what exists now is inadequate, and what will be replacing it, hopefully, will remain adequate until 2050.
And beyond. And beyond.
Maybe beyond.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 2050 is not that far off, right?
Yeah, and beyond.
Okay. Well, it'll be beyond me. I want to reference what the young man said about the history of black watermen around here. He's absolutely right. I think from the beginning in all of the iterations that we've seen of this building, there's always been room for something that's now called the Waterman's Co-op, as a place to maybe actually sell crabs or sell some fresh oysters and give guys a chance to make some money. Place to offload it right there. A place where people can see where their food comes from. So I think that theme has been consistent throughout this whole history of this, which I have seen prior to the 5 years. I was in a group that was led by Mr. Jakubiak that looked at the reconfiguration of the city dock. Final note on retaining or reusing the existing harbor makers have masters building. Doesn't it exist in a flood zone right now?
It is, yeah, the first floor of that is below BFE.
So the argument that you're building a new building in a flood zone, but the new building is raised up higher than the existing building, that argument is not resonating with me, if I'm making sense. Thank you, Mr. FEMA.
Yeah, so I'm a certified floodplain manager. We would call that it's a non-conforming structure, the current structure. And then this one will not be allowed to be built below BFE. So it's already being built, as they mentioned, at or above BFE, which is your base flood elevation. And one other last thing, I apologize. One other comment that I had written down here was regarding the structure not being part of some of these conversations. And I do want to point out that that is not the original design of that structure. I wish that you all had a slide that actually showed the evolution of the structure through the different comments. So when people say that we have not listened to the comments, that structure was not even facing in that direction. It's been sidelined, or it's been flipped. It has been changed multiple times and shrunk some like 580 square feet or something like this. So we have listened and heard these comments and read those comments and made major modifications to the structure to appease the comments that came in. And that's all I had. Thank you very much.
I thank you, because it's been an incredibly collaborative process. And that, it's been an amazing process in some ways that it's actually come here to the finish line. Mr. Turner, thank you. Public restrooms. That is a concern. It's not something that's part of our purview tonight because there are public restrooms in this major site design, which is great. What about, as someone said, you'd have to go to Middleton's and ask to use their public restroom? Well, let me point out something. As part of the original compromise that got this project going, they agreed to exclude the first block of Dock Street, which will remain as a parking lot. And everybody now realizes that was a bad deal. Shouldn't have done it. There's plenty of rooms in the Hillman garage, plenty of spaces in the Hillman garage. But change is inevitable. And I foresee that triangular space will become part of the park when some foresighted mayor agrees. And I've asked Mr. Vogel, and we've made it very clear that the infrastructure should be designed to allow there for a park in the future, because we need to think into the future as well as out of the past. And I would also risk, I don't know what I'm risking, my reputation by saying, the traffic circle is only built in 1954. Its historicism is suspect. And change is inevitable. But for now, for tonight, those are my comments as to this
And if I could, just to pile it on about public restrooms.
They will be down there, right?
Well, I mean, Market House has public restrooms.
Correct.
They need to be redone badly because they're not in great shape. But they are there, and hopefully that will get done at some point. Again, it's beyond the purview of this
Tonight.
discussion, but they do exist in a public forum.
So I'm going to make a motion that everybody's had their chance. Wait a minute, I forgot your question.
I want to, I want to offer a condition.
Well, let me make the
approval?
motion, and then
Okay.
you can make an amendment. I would move to approve this application, and I would include the conditions that are proposed in the staff report. I want to make sure that, by the way, before we proceed much further, before I forget, that what's in the record, I want to make clear that what's in the record. The entire notebook that was prepared for tonight, the photographs that were distributed tonight and shown on almost every one on the screen. I would like to ask, do we want the, Mr. Jakubiak, the correspondence between the city and the Critical Areas Commission, your letter and the two attachments, I think should be part of the record because the compliance with that agency is critically important. And your analysis.
Mr. Chairman, I have the copies of that here for each of the planning commission members. And
provide it to the clerk.
Sure.
And just finally, the staff report. Yes. Do you have a communication from the traffic people? And I think that the communication from the Critical Areas Commission, the email such as we got today, or you got today, should also come in, okay?
Which is the top page of that document.
All right. And the traffic thing as well? Okay. What's this? What? Oh, okay. There were written comments that were submitted online. I think everybody has read them. I certainly have read them beginning to end, and I would like them to be made part of the record as well. All right, so I move that this application be approved.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, well, I already said that his letter and Mr. By the way, I want to, before I even make the motion, Mr. Tompkins' letter and the photographs I've already made part of the record. But I want to say that, you know, you win a little, you lose a little bit, and you're going to win a lot on this one. Most of your frontage is towards Ego Alley. The amount of pedestrian space, terrace space, and basic movement of humans and business that's going to come from this, you're going to benefit from this. I mean, it's a tremendous investment in drawing people down in that direction. And that's been the problem up until now.
I agree.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Waldman, I have one more comment to add to the record.
All right. We also have the traffic Department of Transportation letters of November 15th and December 5th, indicating, by the way, that only 16 more trips would be generated by this building, which is a completely insignificant number, not requiring a new traffic report, for crying out loud. Okay.
Mr. Waldman, I have one more comment. I apologize. Sorry, it just came to me. Was regarding adaptive reuse, just so that people are aware of this, there is a provision in Annapolis's floodplain management ordinance that says that anything that is a non-conforming structure, which would be the current Harbor House, that's a non-conforming structure, which means that any adaptive reuse that meets a threshold of 50% of the cost of that structure, the value of that structure, would mean that it would have to come into compliance with current code, right? And so that's called substantial improvement. And to substantially improve a masonry structure is extremely expensive. So just so that people think about adaptive reuse, that would be one reason to consider against adaptive reuse for a masonry structure that is a non-conforming structure. And I recommend that you all actually put that in as a criteria or a slide to explain why you would not do that. That's all.
May I continue?
Yes, I apologize. It came to me because it's, we have what's called substantial damage, but we also have substantial improvement. That was not something spoken about.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The motion is to approve this application,
I'll second
including
it.
the conditions that are in the staff report. I'll take a second, and then we'll entertain any amendments to that.
So seconded.
Okay. Discussion.
Okay, so I'd like to offer a condition of approval, of this approval. So a little bit of background on with the condition I wanted to bring up. So there was a lot talked about the water dependency issue with respect to the Critical Area Commission, and that's obviously a critical aspect of the use of this building. And so we don't have to rehash all that, but it's been talked about a lot tonight. So the condition that I have to offer here is very much along those lines. I'll just read it and we can go from there. It's the proposed wording. So the Maritime Welcome Center, AKA Harbor Master Facility, or portions thereof in the critical area may not be used, rented, or lent for private or public events that are not directly related to the proposed uses of the facility, harbor master, transient boaters, or visitor center, such as weddings, parties, social events, or social events not related to the inherent functions of those organizations. Basically, you can't make this into a general event space. This is, the shorthand, because that goes against, the whole predication of this being the uses in this building being water dependent. So if you just let people use that wonderful deck to have a wedding, to rent it out to have a wedding, which, that's fine, I suppose, but is that what we want to use a public building for? I don't think so. And I think, renting it for private parties does take away from people's ability, the public's ability to use it. While it might not happen all that much, still, it's sort of it's a view that tells the residents, stay away. So, but anyway, I think more importantly, we have to be really careful about this water dependent uses, because there's been so much in the requirements for that I think it would be a dangerous precedent for the city to try to make other use of the building. And so I think we should explicitly state that as a condition. That's my reasoning there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this again goes into regulation. So 44 CFR 60.3. Sorry, I just know I know the regulations. The actually say, so the verbiage that we use is what's called functionally dependent. And so Mr. Pline would be correct that if we want to stay clear of any sort of coming into non-compliance for the floodplain management ordinances, that we have to stay in regulation with 44 CFR 60.3, which would mean that it has to be functionally dependent.
Yeah, and so just to offer a few examples of kinds of events that I think are acceptable, maybe there's a cruising rally that comes into Annapolis of boaters, and they're going to have a little social event of people who are on moorings, and they're going to get together. That's fine. That's a water dependent thing. The visitor center is going to have a fundraiser. That's fine. It's an inherent function of that use. The harbor master is going to have a public meeting. That's fine. City staff might have private or public meetings in the conference room. That's fine. It's just, so those kinds of things are fine. So it can be used that way, but just not for a general event kind of space that might be attractive because it's a pretty sweet location. And I just don't want the city to be tempted to make that general use of it, because I think it gets us in trouble. So go.
Could you explain the effect that the code has on his proposed?
Sure. So so this is where, as long as it's built at or above BFE, right, then the functional dependency regulations don't actually get triggered. But if any part of the structure at all is considered like really close to that BFE line, you want to make sure that any activity that occurs there has to be functionally dependent. So that's just the threshold. So if you build something that is above that line, then you actually could. But if it's considered at or below, and this really comes into consideration during sea level rise considerations for the future. And so technically you could still have these events and you would not trigger it up until the point when that BFE line is raised due to sea level rise in the future.
Okay.
But it's a federal regulation that this city adopts under the floodplain management ordinance.
Mm-hmm. And what's the purpose of that?
It's to essentially, so the National Flood Insurance Program, which the city of Annapolis is a voluntary participant of, so that they can receive flood insurance, but they can also get covered by FEMA's national disaster regulations, right? Is so that we have to maintain and never come into non-compliance with those regulations.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Background.
Oh, and just one last example of, acceptable things. It really has nothing to do with, the Waterman's Co-op space. That you could still serve oysters to the public. It's not saying anything, anything about that. It's more just.
So I want to clarify, I apologize, is that those regulations really only apply inside the structure, right, for floodplain management ordinance, right? So outside the floodplain management ordinance, anything you do on the grounds, there's no ordinance against that.
Yeah.
So it depends on what is the verbiage for your prohibition, essentially. Is it inside the structure versus outside the structure?
Well, read it again. It says, the harbor master facility or portions thereof in the critical area, because if it's outside the critical area, then we don't possibly run afoul of the issue. So is that one conference room way up in the corner, 30 feet away? Is that technically out of the critical area? Sure, maybe you can rent that conference room to anybody. But I think where this would be an issue is the part of the deck that's on the water that's a really sweet space that you can see somebody want to get married there. So that's the kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway.
So the issues are private or events which exclude the public. Events which, one, exclude the public, and two, are not related to the maritime purposes.
It's really the latter more than the former. You could have a private, the city could have a private meeting, that the harbor master's doing. That's a use that's part of the inherent function of the harbor master. But, I suppose you could have a public party just because Alex Klein wants to throw anybody who wants to come down a party on the deck. No. So public-private's not really the issue. It's more the use, and use, frankly, is one of our purviews. That's very much.
Could you read the proposed condition again?
Okay. The Maritime Welcome Center, aka Harbor Master, or portions thereof in the critical area may not be used, rented, or lent. I don't know what the right legal term is there, but for private or public events that are not directly related to the proposed uses of the facility, harbor master, transient boaters, or visitor center.
Why don't you just say maritime uses?
Okay. Such as weddings, parties, or social events not related to inherent functions of those organizations. You can
clarify inside the structure.
I'm not distinguishing between inside or outside. I'm just distinguishing between what's in the critical area.
You have something to say?
Yeah, just a kind of clarification. Commissioner Pline mentioned within the critical area. This entire building is within the critical area. But I think what you were getting at is within that 30-foot buffer, that's part of the building that extends beyond 30 feet closer to the water, which the critical area requires, our regulations, since you require, have a water dependency function. So I think a standard like this is inherently difficult to administer and opens up the city to a lot of problems. Because if it's not ironclad and drafted in a way that is clear, defensible, and that's very difficult to do. This is a public property, right? But it seems to me that if you were to say it's logical and sensible, given the conditions that led us to this approval, to say that piece of the building, that wing that extends into this critical buffer zone, shall be for water-dependent purposes. That seems a reasonable thing. Or it might be water-dependent purposes as determined by and assign a staff person within the city to make a judgment about it. Either the director of planning zoning or the harbor master, perhaps, is the optimal approach, or director of public works. So there's some type of, process. But you might just limit your restriction to that part that actually is consistent with our zoning process that led us to this approval.
So first of all, it's would be wrong to state within the critical areas. It would be better to state it as within a certain number of feet of the shoreline.
You might say within that 30-foot setback of the buffer, or setback of the water.
By the way, if I could ask Mr. Turner, do you have any idea, Mr. Turner, do you have any idea if that back conference room is within that 30 feet?
It's not.
Okay, thank you. And the second thing is that you think that somebody in the second thing is that it should be defined clearly that it has to be related to the maritime functions of the building. Okay. And thirdly, that there should be a staff person.
Or some type of person that has the authority to make that interpretation. Just suggestions on kind of administrative guidance here.
All right.
For instance, part of the building will have space for a storage and for the director of Parks and Rec to program events in the building and around the building and on City Dock. That's not, is that water dependent? I mean, if the space is on, so there's this, it's hard to disentangle all that. So if you're focused on that principle, I think focus just on the geographic section that comes into that buffer.
I mean, I'm ambivalent at this point. I mean, part of it, it's like, I hate to see the public excluded because somebody's bought the place. It's like, that's not right, you know? That's what makes this, the public nature of it is what makes it so attractive. And on the other hand, it could be used for some things when it's not going to inconvenience the public or exclude them in any way. So you know what I mean? I haven't gotten to clearly understand how this should work. You know?
Trust me?
I don't know.
Yeah, you good with that?
All right. Well, do you want to amend your?
I'm open to amendments. I mean,
not within the critical area, but
yeah, I mean,
30 feet.
Mr. Jakubiak's words are well taken, and I don't want to run afoul of creating some language that is, that doesn't pass muster. But I mean, you understand my sentiment. I guess I'm looking for somebody to phrase it in a way that captures my sentiment. maybe not fair to ask that.
Do you have any suggestions?
You know,
I mean, you'd have to see his paper and you'd have to sort of see it, think it through a bit.
and I mean, let me sort of ask this.
Vote on it.
How does this sentiment resonate with the rest of you? I mean, if it doesn't resonate, let's not waste any more time on it.
I'm like,
So,
abstention is my position.
Abstention?
Yeah. Like I just, like a no vote on my
You don't
part.
really care.
On the condition?
Yeah. Say what?
On the condition?
Yeah, like if it came to a vote, I'd just
Well, I mean, so, you know,
abstain.
Bob's kind of that way, so I don't know where ever it is on that, but I mean, two votes is a nay. So like, if nobody wants to take this further, then let's just stop and go on. But
Well, I do have some concerns. If it becomes a popular place and people, and the public is excluded and they look up and they see people having a fun time, but they can't go into the space.
yeah, exactly.
So I do have some concern about that.
I guess I don't know if this is where I would set that rule. I would almost like want to have that as a flexible rule that maybe the harbor masters or whoever is making that decision. But I agree with you, right? Like in concept, I like the idea of ensuring that this is a public space for the public.
Right. Here's my suggestion.
Maybe the fact that we've discussed it here is enough.
Maybe
I don't know.
This is more complicated than it might appear at the beginning, initially.
Yeah.
My suggestion is that we vote however we're going to vote on this thing tonight, okay? Anybody who votes, frankly, to approve this project at the next meeting, it can be reopened and if the language has been worked out at that point, and a discussion can be had to amend our approval. Okay?
I like it.
To add a condition to your approval.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, we could
that's
add a
fair.
condition to if it's approved tonight. Which gives Mr. Hyatt time to do his maneuvers.
All right, well,
All right.
thank
Any
you for
other
entertaining
discussion
my
on this?
concern.
The hour's late. They don't need to hear any more from us.
Yeah.
Call for a vote?
Second.
All right. All in favor of approving this application, please say aye.
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 Any nays? No. Okay.
Get the shovels ready.
There's no business, old business, there's no new business. I will entertain the final motion of the evening, which is for adjournment.
Second.
So are we going just,
What?
not to be pedantic about the agenda, but I move that we defer the other thing on the agenda to later.
It should have been pulled off. Not important. Deferred.
Good.
There'll be many, many discussions on it. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Klein, Mr. Waldman, and Mr. Cummings, I missed it by 5 minutes on the